Everything will be all right, don't worry, Annie said, then took a clean handkerchief from her apron pocket and offered it to the man. I think you might need this, sir. William stared at her as if she had spoken in a language he used to know but had forgotten. What did you say? He asked. She glanced at the untouched cup, then back at him. Annie gave him a small, steady smile. It's just a towel, sir. You don't have to fight everything tonight. William's jaw tightened. Her words hit him harder than he expected. Why would you say that? He asked, his voice sharper than he intended. You don't know anything about my life. No, sir, she said. I don't. Then maybe don't speak like you do. He looked away, anger rising because anger was easier than shame. Go somewhere else. I don't have any money to give you. Annie did not take offense or pull away. She simply held the coffee pot closer to her side and answered him in a calm, gentle voice. You misunderstood me, sir. I'm not asking for a tip. I don't know anything about your life. I know what it looks like when somebody is sitting in a room but already gone somewhere else, she said. That made him look at her again. Annie reached for the cup. This one's cold. Let me get you a fresh one. I don't want coffee. You ordered coffee. He studied her. What's your name? Annie. Annie what? Carter. William shook his head. Well, Annie Carter, I appreciate the coffee, but there are some things a person doesn't come back from, and you're too young to understand that, he added. Annie did not look offended. She only lowered her eyes for a moment, as if choosing which part of her pain she was willing to place on the table. Maybe not in the way you know it, she said. But losing everything doesn't wait until people are old enough. She pulled a napkin from her apron pocket and placed it beside his cup. My father died on a construction site when I was 12. My mother got sick when I was 15 and passed when I was 16. I signed my first lease before I knew how to cook rice without burning it. I work mornings here, take classes at night, and still get letters from offices telling me I filled out the wrong form or missed some deadline nobody explained. William said nothing. So when you say there are things people don't come back from, Annie continued, I believe you. I just don't believe you get to decide that while you're still breathing. She rested one hand on the edge of the table, not too close, not too far, giving him room to refuse her kindness if that was all he had strength to do. You can talk to me, sir, she said. I'm a stranger. I don't know anything about you. I can't judge you for a life I haven't seen. I may not be able to solve what happened, but I can listen. The words hit him harder than sympathy would have. That was before. Before what? William looked out the window. A bus groaned to a stop at the corner, its brakes complaining in the rain. People climbed aboard with grocery bags, backpacks, work boots, tired shoulders, ordinary people going somewhere, ordinary people who still had somewhere to be. Before I understood that everything I built is gone, he said. Annie did not answer right away. She turned the cup over in her hand, walked to the counter, poured the cold coffee into the sink, and came back with a fresh cup. Steam rose between them. She set it down gently. Everything? William looked at the steam. My company, my name, my reputation, maybe my freedom, if the lawyers are right. Her expression changed then, not with fear, but with attention. But he was tired, more than tired. He was hollowed out. This morning, he said. A bank that used to beg for my business told me they may seize assets by the end of the month. My board wants me removed. The newspapers are calling me a thief. There are documents with my signature on them that I swear I never signed, but it doesn't matter because the signature looks like mine. Annie's fingers tightened around the handle of the coffee pot. And the man who could explain it, William continued. The man I trusted with every number, every account, every detail, has disappeared. What's his name? William gave a tired smile. That's not something you need to carry. I carry plates for 12 hours some days, she said. A name won't break my wrist. For the first time that day, he almost smiled for real. Jonathan Pierce, he said. My chief financial officer. My friend. 20 years. Friends can hurt worse than strangers, she said. The sentence was too simple to argue with. He lowered his eyes. Now those same hands could not hold a coffee cup steady. I'm 50 years old, he said. I have spent half my life building Whitmore Development. I thought I knew the people around me. I thought I knew the business. Now I find out I may have been signing whatever they put in front of me like a fool with a fountain pen. Annie leaned against the edge of the booth across from him, not sitting, not leaving. Did you lose your hands? He frowned. What? Your hands. Did you lose them? No. Your mind? No. Your name? He started to answer, then stopped. Annie nodded as if she had expected that. Then go find the truth before you let people bury it with you still breathing. Outside, a horn sounded. The woman in the red coat took her bag and called, "Thank you, Sam," toward the kitchen. The older men at the counter kept talking. The world did not pause for William Whitmore's ruin. Maybe that was the insult. Maybe it was the mercy. He reached for the coffee and took a sip. It burned his tongue, but he welcomed the pain because it was real and small and honest. Annie watched him. Better hot, isn't it? He gave a weak breath. Slightly. That's a start. He looked up. You talk to all your customers this way? Only the ones who look like they're about to let a cold cup of coffee make the final decision. That time, he did laugh. Quietly, painfully, but it was a laugh. From behind the counter, an older black man with a gray beard and a white towel over one shoulder called out, "Annie, you bothering that gentleman?" "No, Mr. Brooks," she called back. "I'm saving him from bad coffee." The man grunted. "That coffee was fine when it left my pot." Annie rolled her eyes, then looked back at William. "That's Mr. Samuel Brooks. He owns the place. He thinks coffee can fix most things. And you? I think coffee helps while you fix them yourself." William let that settle. Annie saw the tired confusion on his face, the way he seemed to be staring at a door but not knowing which side of it he stood on. William stood, unsteady for a second, and buttoned his wet coat. "Annie Carter," he said, as if memorizing it. "Yes, sir. I don't know if I can fix this." "Then don't start with fixing all of it." "What do I start with?" She picked up the coffee pot again. "The next right thing." Then she added, "Start with the things they don't want you to see, and the people they forgot." William looked at her. Annie's voice stayed quiet, but there was something in it that did not bend. There may be people no one paid attention to. In fancy offices, the people being ignored sometimes hear things no one thinks they heard. He looked at the cup, the booth, the rain, and the young woman who had no reason to care whether he walked out of that diner or disappeared inside himself forever. He did not know where the truth was hiding yet. But for the first time since the scandal broke, William Edward Whitmore did not feel like a man waiting to be buried. And somewhere inside him, the first step away from the corner booth had already begun. Annie was about to turn back toward the counter when William spoke again. "You said everything will be all right." She stopped with the coffee pot still in her hand and looked over her shoulder. "Yes, sir," she said, giving him a small smile. "That's right." William studied her as though he were trying to find the part of her that believed such a thing without proof. "What if you're wrong?" Annie looked at him for a moment, not with pity, not with fear, just with the patience of someone who had learned that pain often asked questions it already knew could not be answered. "Then come back tomorrow and tell me I was wrong," she said. "But first, you have to survive until tomorrow." If Annie's words touched your heart, please like this video, comment where you are watching from, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional and inspiring stories like this. She shifted the coffee pot against her hip and gave him a gentle nod. "Good night, sir." William hesitated for 1 second. "William," he said. "My name is William." Annie smiled, warmer this time. "Good night, Mr. William." The words stayed with him after she walked away. He ignored every message and called Rebecca. She answered on the second ring. "William? Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for hours. I want every document with my signature on it," he said. There was a pause. "What? Not summaries, not reports. Every document. Original files, timestamps, access logs, hospital records, board approvals, everything." "William, slow down. Where are you?" "Chicago. Somewhere west of downtown." "That's not important." "It is important if the press finds you before I do." "The press can wait. Your board won't. The emergency meeting is tomorrow morning, and the bank's attorneys sent another notice an hour ago. I saw enough of the messages. Then you understand how serious this is." "No," William said, watching a bus throw dirty water against the curb. "I understand now that I let other people tell me what serious meant." Rebecca went quiet again. She had worked with him for 12 years, long enough to know when anger was covering fear and when fear had become something else. William, she said carefully, you've never asked to see the raw files before. That's why they thought they could destroy me. He heard her breathe out. All right. Come to my office. No, not your office. Not the company. Somewhere private. My office is private. Nothing connected to Whitmore feels private anymore. Rebecca did not argue. Fine. My house, then. 40 minutes. I'll be there. And William? Yes? Do not speak to anyone else. Not the board, not Margaret, not a reporter, not a friend. He almost laughed at the last word. I'm running low on those. That may be a blessing tonight, she said, and ended the call. Then William stepped off the curb and raised his hand for a cab. Rebecca lived in a brick townhouse on a quiet street lined with old maples. No press waited outside. No board members. No employees with worried faces. When she opened the door, she was still in work clothes, her reading glasses pushed onto her head, a folder tucked under one arm. You look terrible, she said. That seems to be the consensus. She stepped aside. Come in. Her living room did not look like the offices where William usually heard bad news. No glass walls, no polished conference table. There were family photographs on a bookcase, a half-finished cup of tea near a legal pad, and a sleeping golden retriever who lifted his head, judged William harmless, and went back to sleep. Rebecca handed him a towel. Dry off before you ruin my chair. He took it. You always this warm with clients? Only the ones accused of financial fraud. He rubbed rain from his hair and followed her to the dining table, where she had already spread several folders. Tell me exactly what you think happened, she said. Then she paused, studying his face more closely. And before that, I have to ask, why do you look different? William lowered himself into the chair. You won't believe it. But over 1 cup of coffee, I was lucky enough to receive the kind of advice that changed me. Rebecca's eyebrows lifted. A cup of coffee? At a small diner west of downtown? That doesn't sound like your usual boardroom. It wasn't. He looked down at the folders on the table, then back at her. Annie. That's her name. Somehow, that girl opened a road for me when I couldn't see one. Rebecca leaned back, surprised, but not dismissive. That sounds interesting. I'd very much like to meet her. William gave a faint nod. Maybe one day. Tonight, I need to make sure I don't waste what she gave me. For a moment, he had no answer to Rebecca's first question. He knew headlines. He knew accusations. He knew the sound of men in suits, telling him exposure, liability, optics. But Annie's question had stripped all that away. What is the next right thing? I think Jonathan used my signature, he said slowly, or made it look like I signed documents I never saw. Rebecca nodded. Possible, but difficult to prove. I think he moved money through companies tied to someone else. Likely. We have names, but not a clean link yet. I think he counted on me not reading anything myself. This time, Rebecca did not answer quickly. William looked at her. Say it. She sat across from him. You made that easy for him. Yes, he said. I did. Rebecca studied him. That might be the first useful thing you've said all week. Glad my humiliation is productive. It's not humiliation if it gets you honest. She opened the first folder and turned it toward him. These are the documents the board is using against you. 3 transfer authorizations. 2 development amendments. 1 emergency liquidity agreement. All signed or digitally approved under your credentials. William stared at the pages. His name looked back at him again and again, confident and damning. That one, he said, touching the second page. I don't remember it. You don't remember a lot of them. No, this one is different. Rebecca leaned in. Why? He read the date twice. March 18, a Tuesday. The numbers on the page blurred, then sharpened. I wasn't at the office that day. Your calendar says executive review from 10 to noon. My calendar was wrong. He tapped the date. I was at Northwestern Memorial. Cardiac evaluation. Margaret insisted after I almost passed out at that charity breakfast. Rebecca reached for her laptop. Do you have records? Probably. My doctor would. Probably won't save you. Definitely might. William looked at the signature again. It was elegant, practiced, familiar. His name, his shape, his authority. A lie, wearing his face. A strange cold moved through him that had nothing to do with the rain. Rebecca typed quickly. If you were in the hospital during a supposed in-person signing, we have a problem for them. Not proof of the whole scheme, but a crack. A crack is enough? For tonight, a crack is a place to put a crowbar. He almost heard Annie in that sentence. Start with what they don't want you to see. Access logs, he said. Rebecca glanced up. I want to know who entered my credentials that day. And not just executives. Assistants. IT. Security. Cleaning crews. Anyone near the floor? Rebecca's expression changed. Cleaning crews? William saw Annie's face in his mind, calm and unbought. In fancy offices, the people being ignored sometimes hear things no one thinks they heard. Yes, he said, all of them. William, that's a wide net. Then cast it wide. She sat back. What happened to you tonight? He thought of cold coffee, a steady voice, and a young woman who had lost more by 18 than many men lost in a lifetime. Annie, that girl reminded me that ordinary people notice things, he said. Rebecca did not press him. She pulled another folder from the stack. Then we start with March 18. For the next 2 hours, William did something he had not done in years. He read every line. He asked when he did not understand. He wrote dates by hand on a yellow legal pad. He circled names he used to skim past. He noticed initials in margins, approval codes, routing stamps, time entries that seemed harmless until placed beside the wrong signature. Near midnight, Rebecca made coffee. It was strong and bitter, nothing like the diners. But he drank it anyway. At 12:17 a.m., they found the second crack. A digital approval under William's credentials had been entered at 11:43 p.m. on a night he had been speaking at a hospital fundraiser in front of 400 people. Rebecca stared at the screen. That's not possible. William leaned back, tired enough to feel every one of his 50 years, but no longer hollow. No, he said, it's not. For the first time all day. The truth had stopped hiding completely. The next morning, while William was still sitting at Rebecca's dining table with red eyes and a legal pad full of dates, Annie Carter was unlocking the side door of Brooks' Diner before sunrise. The street outside was quiet except for the bus sighing at the corner and a delivery truck backing into the alley behind the bakery. Annie pulled her jacket tighter around her, stepped inside, and turned on the lights one row at a time. The neon sign in the front window flickered twice before holding steady. Open. She always liked that moment, not because the day was easy, but because the word felt like a promise someone had decided to keep. She tied on her apron, checked the coffee filters, wiped down the counter, and started the first pot before Mr. Samuel Brooks came in through the kitchen door carrying a box of eggs against his hip. You beat me again, he said. You move slower every year, Mr. Brooks. I move with dignity. You move like your knee knows rain is coming. He gave her a look over the top of his glasses. A smart mouth before 6 in the morning is a sign of poor upbringing. My mother raised me right. You just taught me sarcasm. That made him laugh, low and rough. The kind of laugh that came from a man who had lived long enough to know some mornings needed humor before they allowed work to begin. He set the eggs down and looked at her more closely. You eat yet? Yes, sir. That means no. It means I'm fine. It means no. He went to the grill, cracked 2 eggs, and dropped bread into the toaster. Employee mistake. Kitchen made extra. There are no customers yet. Then the kitchen is predicting the future. Annie shook her head, but she did not argue. Mr. Brooks had known her mother, Denise Carter, long before Annie was tall enough to see over the counter. He had given Annie her first summer job sweeping floors when she was 14. Then more hours after her mother got sick, and more after the funeral. He never called it charity. He called it keeping good workers where they belong. And Annie let him have that lie, because it protected both their pride. She ate standing near the sink, one eye on the front window. A few regulars came in just after 6:30. Mr. Langley, a retired mail carrier, took his usual seat and ordered oatmeal he always salted too much. Mrs. Alvarez asked for coffee with cream and told Annie her grandson had finally called from Texas. A sanitation worker named Daryl came in for a bacon sandwich and left a $1 tip folded under the ketchup bottle. This was the world Annie understood. Tired people, small kindnesses, bills due Friday, buses running late. Coffee refilled before someone had to ask. Nobody in Brooks' diner had towers named after them. Nobody had a board of directors. But everyone carried something. At 8:15, during the first lull, Annie pulled her phone from her apron pocket and checked her email. The message from Harold Washington Community College sat at the top, bold and waiting. She had avoided opening it since the night before. Avoiding things did not erase them, but sometimes it let a person breathe until breakfast rush was over. She tapped it. Dear Miss Carter, our records indicate an outstanding balance on your student account. Registration for the upcoming term may be placed on hold if payment is not received by the listed deadline. She read it once, then again. The amount was not enormous to people who discussed money in conference rooms. To Annie, it was rent, bus fare, groceries, and half a month of sleep. Mr. Brooks saw her face from the grill. School? She locked the phone and slid it away. Just an email. That wasn't my question. I know. He turned down the heat under the hash browns. How much? Mr. Brooks. How much, child? I'm handling it. That is what people say when they are not handling it. Annie reached for a rag and began wiping a counter that was already clean. I picked up extra hours this week. I can call the financial aid office again. Maybe they'll extend it. And if they don't, then I'll figure something out. He leaned his hands on the counter, his voice softer now. Your mama used to say the same thing. Annie stopped wiping. She would stand right there, telling me she had everything handled while her eyes looked like she hadn't slept since Easter. He pointed at the stool near the register. Sit a minute. I have tables. You have two old men arguing over toast. They can survive without you for 60 seconds. Annie sat because she was too tired to pretend standing made her stronger. Mr. Brooks poured coffee into a mug and placed it in front of her. You don't have to carry every brick alone. I'm not alone. No? I have work. I have school. I have a lease. I am mostly not late on. I have you pretending eggs accidentally jump on plates. That's not the same as being held. She looked down at the coffee. The word held made something ache in her chest because it belonged to things she remembered too well. Her father's hand on her shoulder at church, her mother humming while braiding her hair before school, the way hospital rooms turned families into people who whispered over bills. My father used to come home with dust in his boots, she said quietly. Concrete dust, drywall dust. Some days he'd be so tired he'd sit on the edge of the tub and rinse his hands before he even hugged me, because he didn't want that dust on my clothes. Then one day a man from the company came to our apartment and said there had been an accident. After that, everybody talked about forms. Mr. Brooks did not interrupt. Forms for insurance, forms for compensation, forms for permission to ask about other forms. My mother kept a folder under her bed, and every time somebody said no, she put another paper in it. Then she got sick, and the folder got thicker. Annie rubbed her thumb along the handle of the mug. I think that's when I decided I wanted to study law. Not because I like arguing, because people like us shouldn't need a miracle to understand what we're signing. Mr. Brooks nodded once, slow. That is a good reason. It's also an expensive reason. Good reasons usually are. The bell over the front door rang, and Annie rose before he could say more. A young mother came in with a little boy in a school uniform, both of them wet from the morning drizzle. Annie greeted them, brought napkins, then cocoa for the boy when she noticed his hands shaking from the cold. She moved through the diner with the ease of someone who had learned that serving did not mean lowering herself. She was not less than the people she fed. She was simply awake to what they needed. Near 10, during another quiet stretch, she thought about William. Mr. William, she had called him. It sounded almost foolish now, but he had looked less like a rich man when she said it, more like someone who had been waiting to be addressed as a human being instead of a headline. She wondered if he had survived the night. The thought troubled her more than she expected. Annie had seen desperate men before, men who lost jobs, men who drank away paychecks, men who sat in the diner until closing because home had become heavier than a booth. But William's despair had been different. It had the silence of a man ashamed to still be alive while his name burned in public. At 11:30, Mr. Brooks slid a plate of meatloaf special under the warmer and glanced at her. You keep looking at the door. No, I don't. You do. I'm checking customers. The door is not a customer. She gave him a look. You always this nosy? With people I love, yes. Annie lowered her eyes so he would not see how much that word mattered. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her landlord, a short message with no greeting. Rent increase notice takes effect next month. Call office with questions. She stared at it until the letters blurred. Then she put the phone away, straightened her apron, and picked up the coffee pot. Mrs. Alvarez raised her cup from the counter. "More coffee, sweetheart?" "Yes, ma'am," Annie said, smiling because service had taught her how to keep her sorrow from spilling onto other people's plates. As she poured, she remembered her mother's voice as clearly as if Denise Carter were standing beside her. "Never let pain make you cruel." Annie had repeated those words after the funeral, after the shut-off notices, after the financial aid office told her she was missing one more document, after strangers looked at her like a young black girl alone must have done something wrong to end up that way. She repeated them now, not because they solved anything, but because they kept her from becoming the kind of person who saw a hurting stranger and walked away. That afternoon, when the lunch rush slowed and the rain finally stopped, Annie stepped outside for 1 minute of air. Chicago smelled like wet pavement, bus exhaust, and bread from the bakery next door. She leaned against the brick wall, closed her eyes, and let herself feel how tired she was. Then she opened them and went back inside. There were tables to clean, classes to attend, rent to face, and a life to keep building one small decision at a time. Somewhere in the city, William Whitmore was looking for the truth in a stack of papers. Annie did not know whether he would find it, but she hoped he would come back. Not to prove she was right, to prove he had made it to tomorrow. By late afternoon, Annie had changed from her diner apron into the dark blue hoodie she wore to class, but she had not left. A bus delay alert glowed on her phone, and the sky outside Brooks' diner had turned the color of old metal. She sat at the end of the counter with a notebook open, trying to review a chapter on constitutional rights, while Mr. Brooks argued with a supplier on the phone about the price of eggs. She had read the same paragraph 4 times when the bell over the door rang. William came in carrying a folder under one arm and a paper bag from a pharmacy in the other. His suit was not soaked this time, but he looked as if he had not slept. His eyes moved around the diner until they found her. Annie closed her notebook. "You made it to tomorrow." He stopped near the counter, and for a second, something in his face softened. "I did." "Then I wasn't wrong." "Not yet." Mr. Brooks hung up the phone and looked from Annie to William. "This the man with the bad coffee emergency?" Annie gave him a warning look. "Mr. Brooks." William stepped forward. "William Whitmore." Samuel Brooks wiped his hand on a towel before shaking his. "Sam Brooks. Around here, coffee emergencies are taken seriously. I've been told. You eating or just looking haunted again?" William almost smiled. "Coffee, black, and toast, if it's not too much trouble. In a diner, toast is never trouble." Mr. Brooks turned toward the kitchen. "Annie, you got 5 minutes before that bus comes. Sit with the man before he scares off my dinner customers." "I don't scare that easily," William said. Mr. Brooks glanced back. "That remains to be seen." Annie took the booth across from William, the same corner where he had sat the night before. He placed the folder on the table but did not open it right away. "You look worse," she said. Rebecca said the same thing. "Rebecca is the lawyer?" "Yes, Rebecca Hayes. She helped me look through the first set of documents last night." "And?" He tapped the folder. "You were right." "About what?" "About people leaving fingerprints. We found a transfer authorization dated March 18. It says I signed it in person at the office. But I was at Northwestern Memorial that morning for a cardiac evaluation. There's another approval entered under my credentials late at night while I was speaking at a fundraiser." Annie leaned in. "So someone used your name when you couldn't have been there." "That's what it looks like." "That sounds good." "It sounds useful," he corrected. "Good is still far away." Mr. Brooks came by with coffee and toast. "Far away, things still need breakfast." He set the plate down and walked off before William could refuse. William looked at the toast, then at Annie. "Does he feed everyone whether they ask or not?" "Only people who look like they might fall over." "He must stay busy." "He does." William took a bite because Annie watched until he did. The toast was plain, buttered at the edges, and somehow more difficult to swallow than a 5-course meal at a charity gala. Ordinary food required an ordinary appetite. He was trying to remember how to be an ordinary man long enough to survive. "What happens next?" Annie asked. "I keep reading. Rebecca is asking for full access logs. We need to prove who entered my credentials. where from, and when. We also need to connect Jonathan to the shell companies. Shell companies? Fake or empty companies used to move money where people won't notice. Annie nodded slowly. Like hiding a dirty plate under a clean napkin. That may be the clearest legal explanation I've heard. She shrugged. Diner law. He gave a quiet laugh, but it faded fast. The problem is the board meeting tomorrow. They may vote to remove me before we have enough evidence. Can they do that? They can try. If they call me a liability, yes. And right now, I am one. Annie looked at the folder. Then why are you here instead of sleeping or fighting with them? William did not answer quickly. He could have said he came for coffee, but both of them would know it was a lie. I wanted to tell you I made it to tomorrow, he said. Annie's expression changed, just a little. She looked down at her notebook, then back at him. I'm glad. So Amy, for a moment, they sat with that simple truth between them. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and stood. That's my bus. Class? Yes. What are you studying tonight? Introduction to Criminal Justice. That feels timely. Maybe I'll learn something useful for you. I hope not. I'd rather not need criminal justice. You already do, Mr. William. The name landed strangely. Not childish, not mocking. It made him feel less like a headline. He watched her gather her notebook, and when a folded paper slipped from between the pages, he reached for it before it fell. It was a school notice. He saw only a few words before Annie took it back, but they were enough. Outstanding balance, registration hold, deadline. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't mean to read it. It's fine. It didn't look fine. It's school. School likes money. How much? Her face closed. No, I didn't even offer. You were about to. He looked down at his coffee. I suppose I was. I talked to you last night because you looked like you needed someone to listen. Not because I wanted you to fix my life. I know. Do you? He met her eyes. I'm trying to. That answer slowed her anger. She tucked the paper into her notebook. My mother used to say help that doesn't respect you is just another kind of weight. She sounds wise. She was. What was her name? Denise Carter. And your father? Marcus. Annie zipped her bag. He worked construction. He died on a site when I was 12. William grew still. Construction? Yes. Was it here in Chicago? South Side. A subcontractor job. I don't know much more than what was in the papers. My mom tried to get answers. But companies are very good at sending regular people in circles. He did not know what to say. His own company had used subcontractors across half the city for decades. He wanted to ask the name, the year, the project, but her bus would not wait, and grief was not something he had the right to search through because it interested him. Instead, he said, I'm sorry. Annie watched him, perhaps judging whether the words had weight. Thank you. The bus hissed outside. She hurried toward the door, then stopped. Mr. William? Yes? Don't just look at the big names. He straightened. What do you mean? The people who clean offices, deliver food, fix printers, drive cars, sit at front desks. Rich men talk in front of people they don't think count. William thought of the access logs. Assistants, IT, security, cleaning crews, anyone near the floor. That's what you said last night. I meant it. The bell above the door rang as she left. William sat alone with the coffee, the folder, and the sound of rain beginning again. He opened the first page and wrote Annie's advice on the inside cover. Don't just look at the big names. Then he called Rebecca. I need the employee access list for March 18, he said. I'm working on it, not just executives. I want building staff, janitorial contractors, catering, delivery logs, security desk entries, parking garage records. Rebecca paused. That's broader than we discussed. It needs to be. Why? Because Jonathan may have hidden behind people he thought no one would ask. That's a theory. It's also how men like us get careless. Rebecca did not answer for a moment. Men like us? People with offices high enough to forget who can hear us from the ground. Who taught you that? William looked at the diner door Annie had just walked through. Someone on the ground. Rebecca's voice softened, though she tried to keep it professional. All right. I'll request the logs tonight. But if we push too hard, the board will know we're looking. They already know I'm bleeding. Let them worry that I'm still standing." After they hung up, William forced himself to eat the rest of the toast. It had gone cold, but he ate it anyway. The next morning's board meeting took place on the 42nd floor of Whitmore Development Group, in a room that had been designed to make powerful people feel even more powerful. The table was long enough to distance men from responsibility. The view showed Chicago spread beneath them in steel, glass, traffic, and lake wind. William arrived without his usual entourage. The room quieted when he entered. Some board members looked away. Others watched him with the careful concern of people already preparing to vote against him. At the far end, the interim compliance officer arranged papers as if paper could protect everyone from shame. Charles Wentworth, the oldest board member, cleared his throat. "William, given the severity of the allegations, we need to discuss temporary removal of your executive authority." "Temporary," William said, taking his seat. "That's a polite word. It is a necessary one." A woman from the risk committee leaned forward. "The banks are concerned. Our partners are concerned. Public confidence is collapsing." "So is the truth," William said. "And everyone in this room seems willing to let it fall as long as it falls on me." No one spoke. He opened his folder. "On March 18, one of the transfer authorizations you're using against me was supposedly signed in person at this office. I was at Northwestern Memorial. My physician's office is preparing confirmation. Another approval was entered at 11:43 p.m., while I was on stage at a hospital fundraiser." The compliance officer frowned. "Digital credentials can be used remotely." "Exactly," William said. "So the question is, who used them?" The mood in the room shifted, not enough to save him, but enough to disturb the script they had planned. Charles Wentworth folded his hands. "Do you have proof of unauthorized access?" "Not yet, but I have enough to demand that this board not bury me before the audit is complete." "And if we proceed with temporary removal?" William looked around the table. For the first time, he noticed who was nervous, who was impatient, who avoided his eyes at the mention of March 18. "Then you'd better make sure your own signatures are clean," he said. That landed. By noon, the board delayed the vote for 48 hours. It was not victory. It was time. Time was all Annie had told him to survive for. When William stepped into the elevator, his phone buzzed with a message from Rebecca. "We got partial access logs. You need to see this." He stared at the words as the elevator descended. Somewhere between the 42nd floor and the lobby, William realized the next right thing had become a trail. And this time, he intended to follow it all the way down. Rebecca's message waited on William's phone like a match held too close to dry paper. "We got partial access logs. You need to see this." He read it twice before the elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened onto polished marble, security desks, glass walls, and employees pretending not to look at him. 2 days ago, they would have nodded with practiced respect. Now their eyes moved away too quickly, as if accusation might spread by contact. William crossed the lobby without stopping. Outside, a black SUV idled near the curb, but he had not called for it. His driver, Paul, stepped out anyway. "Mr. Whitmore," Paul said, holding the rear door open. William paused. "Who told you I was here?" "Your assistant, sir. She thought you might need a ride." For a moment, William heard Annie's voice. "Don't just look at the big names. Rich men talk in front of people they don't think count." William looked at Paul more carefully. He was in his late 50s, gray at the temples, with the steady posture of a man who had spent years waiting outside buildings while other men made decisions inside them. "Paul, how long have you driven for me?" 7 years next month, sir." "And how many times have you waited in the garage while Jonathan Pierce came and went?" Paul's face changed, but only slightly. "Many times." "Did he ever use my car?" "Not without you, sir." "Did he ever ask you not to log a pickup?" Paul looked toward the building, then back at William. "Once or twice, he asked me to wait around the corner instead of the main entrance. Said reporters were nearby." "When?" "I'd have to check my notes." "You keep notes?" "Yes, sir. Pickup times, locations, mileage. Old habit. My father drove a cab for 30 years. He used to say a man who drives for a living should trust the road but write down the turns. William felt the first small tug of possibility. Do not give those notes to anyone but me or Rebecca Hayes. Paul nodded. Is something wrong, sir? William almost gave the old answer. It's being handled. Instead, he said, yes. And I should have asked people like you sooner. Paul did not smile. He only closed the SUV door and lowered his voice. Then you should ask the night guard too. William stilled. Which night guard? Eddie Morales. Works the south entrance. He sees more than the cameras do. Before William could ask more, his phone rang. Rebecca, where are you? She asked. Outside the tower. Come to my office now. The logs are incomplete. But there's something strange. I'm on my way. And Rebecca? What? Add Paul Henson and Eddie Morales to the list of people we need to speak with. A pause. Who are they? My driver and the night guard. William, Annie was right. We've been looking at the top floor while the truth may have walked through the garage. Rebecca exhaled. Fine. Bring whatever you can. Her office felt different in daylight. The rain had stopped, and the city outside her windows looked washed but not clean. Rebecca had 3 monitors open and papers spread across the conference table. Her assistant, a young paralegal named May, left as soon as William entered, closing the door behind her. Rebecca pointed to the screen. March 18. Your credentials were used at 10:42 a.m. for the transfer authorization. The system marked it as an executive terminal login from your office suite. I was at Northwestern. I know, that's the first crack. But look here. She zoomed in. The login came through your office terminal, but the badge entry attached to the suite belongs to a temporary facilities pass. Facilities? Cleaning contractor. Not an employee badge. The name attached is Luis Ramirez. But the contractor says Luis was not scheduled that morning. So someone used his pass. Or cloned it. Or the record was altered. Rebecca clicked again. Now the 11:43 p.m. digital approval from the fundraiser night. Same pattern. Your credentials, different access point, routed through an internal device that should not have had executive permission. Whose device? That's the problem. The device ID was wiped. William's jaw tightened. Jonathan. Likely, but likely won't hold in court. He walked to the window, then turned back. What about the security cameras? March 18 cameras outside your suite were down for maintenance from 10:20 to 11:05. Convenient. Very. And the night approval? Server logs show a remote session, but the IP was masked through the company VPN. Whoever did this knew where to blur the trail. William stared at the screen until the numbers began to feel personal. This was not chaos. It was craftsmanship. Someone had built a lie with patience. Jonathan always said the safest fraud was the kind that looked like routine, he said. Rebecca looked up. He said that to you? At a dinner years ago. He was talking about a competitor's scandal. I thought he was being clever. He was telling you how he thinks. William sat, and for the first time since morning his exhaustion showed. He knew I wouldn't read the logs. He knew the board would panic. He knew the banks would protect themselves. He knew Margaret would come after what was left. Rebecca's face tightened at Margaret's name. Her attorney called again. Of course he did. She wants assurance that any remaining marital asset claims are preserved before the company enters receivership. William gave a humorless laugh. The house burns and she wants to know which room still belongs to her. I'm not defending her. I'm telling you she's another pressure point. She always was. Rebecca leaned back. We need hospital confirmation. Fundraiser footage. Full access logs. Badge records. And someone willing to say Jonathan manipulated procedure. Paul keeps notes. He said Jonathan asked to be picked up around corners. He also mentioned Eddie Morales. The night guard? Yes. Can you trust Paul? William almost answered automatically, then stopped. I don't know. That's the point, isn't it? I trusted the wrong man completely. Now I have to listen carefully without worshiping anyone. Rebecca nodded, approving despite herself. That coffee really was something. It wasn't the coffee. No, she said. I suppose not. That evening, William returned to Brooks' diner with the folder tucked under his coat. He told himself he was there because it was near the bus line, because he had not eaten, because Mr. Brooks served coffee strong enough to keep a man upright. But the truth was simpler. He wanted to tell Annie the trail had begun. She was clearing plates from a family of 4 when he walked in. She saw him and tilted her head. "You're back before I could tell you I was right. Don't get used to it. Too late." Mr. Brooks called from the counter. "Mr. William, you want toast, or are we pretending coffee is dinner again?" "Toast," William said. "And whatever soup you recommend." Samuel froze for dramatic effect. "Lord, he can be taught." Annie laughed and came to the booth after dropping the dishes at the pass-through. "You found something. Access logs. A false in-person signing. A facilities pass that may have been used by someone else. A wiped device ID. Maybe a night guard who saw something." Her smile faded into focus. "So the people they forgot." "Yes. Good. That's all? Good? What do you want, fireworks?" "You found a thread. Now pull it." He looked at her, grateful and unsettled by how easily she cut through his fear. "You make it sound simple." "No, I make it sound possible." Before he could respond, her phone buzzed on the table beside her order pad. She glanced down, and the light left her face. She turned it over quickly, but William saw enough. College account, payment deadline. He did not offer money. He remembered the warning in her eyes from the day before. Instead, he asked, "Do you have class tonight? If the bus comes, and if it doesn't, I'll catch the next one. And if the deadline comes?" She looked at him then. "Careful, Mr. William. I'm not trying to fix it." "Then what are you trying to do?" "Understand what it costs you to keep going." That disarmed her more than an offer would have. She sat across from him, tired enough to be honest. "It costs sleep," she said, "and sometimes lunch, sometimes pride. When I have to ask an office to explain a form like I'm 5 years old. Sometimes it costs pretending I'm not scared." William nodded slowly. "And still you told me to survive until tomorrow. People can be scared and still tell the truth." He thought of Paul, Eddie Morales, Luis Ramirez, and a company full of people he had passed for years without seeing. "I need to talk to a night guard," he said. "Eddie Morales." Annie's expression shifted. "Then don't go in sounding like a billionaire." "How does a billionaire sound?" "Like time belongs to him." That one hurt, but he accepted it. "How should I sound?" "Like you're asking, not collecting." Mr. Brooks arrived with soup and toast. "Best advice in this building, and she gives it away for free." Annie stood. "Not free. He has to use it." William watched her return to work. For a moment, the noise of the diner settled around him. Plates, coffee, soft voices, the ordinary music of people surviving another day. He opened his folder and wrote another line beneath the first. "Ask, don't collect." At 9 that night, William stood at the south entrance of Whitmore Tower, not in the executive lobby but near the loading dock where delivery vans came and went. Eddie Morales sat behind a battered desk with a small TV playing a muted basketball game. He looked up, startled. "Mr. Whitmore?" William kept his hands visible and his voice low. "Mr. Morales, I'm sorry to bother you at work. I need to ask you about March 18. Eddie's eyes moved toward the camera in the corner. William noticed. "Not here then?" The guard swallowed. "I didn't say that. No. But you looked at the camera before answering." Eddie said nothing. William pulled a chair from the wall and sat down, not across the desk like a boss, but beside it like a tired man asking directions. "I'm not here to collect anything from you," he said. "I'm asking." Eddie studied him for a long moment. Then he reached under the desk, took out a small spiral notebook, and placed one hand over it. "I wondered when somebody would finally ask," he said. William felt the trail tighten in his hands. Eddie Morales did not open the notebook right away. His hand stayed on the cover. Fingers spread, as if the little spiral pad were a door he had been guarding longer than the building itself. William waited. The old version of him would have filled the silence. He would have leaned forward, asked for names, dates, proof, anything useful. Tonight he remembered Annie's warning. "Ask, don't collect." Eddie looked toward the loading dock window. A delivery truck rumbled past, its headlights sliding over the concrete walls. "You know what it's like down here at night, Mr. Whitmore?" "No," William said. "I don't." That's the first honest answer I've heard from upstairs in years. William accepted it without defense. Eddie opened the notebook. The pages were packed with small handwriting. Times, license plates, visitor names, weather notes, elevator outages, maintenance calls. My wife says I write too much. I tell her a building talks if you listen long enough. What did it say on March 18? Eddie turned several pages. That morning, cameras on 42 were marked for maintenance. That was strange because maintenance usually comes through me first when they need after-hours access or restricted floor clearance, but this was put in as an executive service request. By Jonathan Pierce? His office. Not his name directly. Who came in? Eddie ran one finger down the page. Temporary facilities badge. Name on the system said Luis Ramirez, but the man who used it was not Luis. How do you know? Because Luis is 5 to 6, talks about his twins every time he signs in, and wears a White Sox cap even when the rules say he shouldn't. The man on March 18 was taller, kept his head down. No cap. Did you stop him? Eddie's mouth tightened. Badge cleared. Work order cleared. Camera maintenance cleared. I asked. He said he was running late, and Mr. Pierce would have his job if he didn't get upstairs. Men down here hear that kind of thing and think about rent. William looked at the notebook. Did you write anything else? Eddie turned the pad toward him. Beside the entry was a note. Not Luis, gray coat. Left 10:58. Met J.P. car south curb. J.P. car, William said. Blacktown car, not yours. I wrote the plate. William felt his pulse move in his throat. Eddie, would you tell this to my attorney? The guard looked at him, then looked again toward the camera. I got 14 months to retirement. My daughter's in nursing school. If I lose this job, I don't bounce back like you people do. You're right, William said. You don't. That's why I won't ask you to stand alone. Eddie studied him for a long time. You sound different than you do in the lobby. I'm learning I should have come through this door years ago. That seemed to reach him more than any promise. Eddie tore out a copy sheet from the back of the notebook, wrote the plate number again, and slid it across. Don't use my name until your lawyer can protect it. I won't. And, Mr. Whitmore? Yes? If Mr. Pierce did what I think he didn't do it once. William folded the paper carefully. That's what I'm afraid of. At Rebecca's townhouse, the plate number changed the room. She ran it through a private investigator before midnight. The car belonged to a corporate transport service often used by Whitmore executives, but the bill for March 18 had been charged to a consulting account tied to Northline Holdings, one of the shell companies already on Rebecca's list. Rebecca stood with both hands on the back of a chair. This connects Jonathan's orbit to the false signing. Orbit isn't enough. No, but it's closer. William rubbed his eyes. Eddie thinks there were more. There probably were. Fraud likes practice. His phone buzzed. He expected another attorney. Maybe a board member. Instead, it was a text from an unknown number with a photo attached. William opened it and went still. The photo showed him in Brooks' diner, sitting across from Annie. It had been taken through the window. Below it was a message. Nice story. Careful who you drag into it. Rebecca came around the table. What is it? He handed her the phone. Her face hardened. When was this taken? Tonight. Someone followed you. No, William said, feeling the shame hit before the anger. Someone followed her. Rebecca zoomed in on the image. We need to keep her out of this. She's already in it because of me. William, listen to me. If Jonathan knows you're emotionally connected to this girl, he may use that. Publicly, privately, both. She's 18. That won't stop him. It may make it easier. They'll call her paid, coached, manipulated. They'll make her life harder before they ever touch yours. William heard the man in the diner again, the sneer Annie had endured before it even happened in public. Girls like me can be bought. I have to warn her. Do not text anything detailed. Assume your phone may not be clean. William stood. Then I'll go. At 1 in the morning? She opens before sunrise. Rebecca reached for her coat. I'm coming with you. Brooks' diner was closed when they arrived. The neon sign dark, chairs turned upside down on the tables. A narrow light glowed from the kitchen. Mister, Brooks opened the back door after 3 knocks, holding a rolling pin like a weapon. Somebody better be dying, he said, then saw William's face. Lord, What now? I need to speak with Annie. She's not here. She's home. Is she safe? Mr. Brooks lowered the rolling pin. Why are you asking me that? Rebecca stepped forward, professional and calm. Mr. Brooks, I'm Rebecca Hayes, William's attorney. Someone took a photograph of Annie with him tonight and sent it as a threat. The old man's eyes lost all humor. Come in. Inside, the diner smelled like bleach, old coffee, and cooling pie. Mr. Brooks locked the door behind them. Annie lives 6 blocks from here. She walks sometimes when the bus runs late. William's stomach tightened. At night? She's been doing it since her mama passed. Don't look at me like I approve. I offer rides. She says she can manage. Call her, William said. Mr. Brooks did. No answer. He called again. Still nothing. Rebecca's voice stayed even. Does she silence her phone for sleep? Sometimes, but not when I call twice. William was already moving. Where? Mr. Brooks grabbed his coat. I'm driving. They found Annie 3 blocks from the diner, walking fast with her hood up and a backpack tight against one shoulder. A dark sedan rolled slowly half a block behind her without headlights. When Mr. Brooks turned sharply onto the street, the sedan sped away. Samuel slammed his palm against the steering wheel. Cowards. William was out of the car before it fully stopped. Annie. She turned, startled. Mr. William, what are you doing here? Are you all right? I'm fine. Why? Rebecca came up behind him. Annie. My name is Rebecca Hayes. I'm William's attorney. Someone photographed you with him tonight and sent it to threaten him. Annie looked from Rebecca to William, then down the empty street where the sedan had disappeared. Understanding arrived slowly, and with it, anger. So now I'm part of their game. William's voice was low. I'm sorry. I don't need sorry right now. I need to know if someone is going to show up at my apartment. Mr. Brooks stepped closer. You're not sleeping there tonight. Mr. Brooks. No, you can argue with me after breakfast. Tonight you're taking the spare room above the diner. Annie opened her mouth, but the fear she had been holding back crossed her face. She was 18, alone, and tired of being brave for free. All right, she said. Back at the diner, Mr. Brooks made tea, though nobody asked for it. Annie sat in the corner booth, arms folded, jaw set. William sat across from her, but left enough space between them for her anger. I should have stayed away, he said. That would have been easier for you. No, for you. She looked at him. Men like Jonathan count on that too, don't they? Make trouble near people with less power, then wait for everyone decent to back off out of guilt. Rebecca watched Annie with new interest. William said, I don't want you hurt because of me. I don't want to be hurt because of anyone. But I also don't want men like that deciding where I can sit, who I can talk to, or whether my name gets dragged through mud because I served coffee to the wrong man. Mr. Brooks placed tea in front of her. Drink. She took the cup, hands tight around it. I have a tuition deadline in 2 days, rent going up next month, and now some car is following me because a rich man's friend got greedy. I am allowed to be mad. Yes, William said. You are. That answer took some of the fight from her shoulders. Rebecca leaned forward. Annie, you don't owe us anything, but I need to ask if you noticed anyone watching the diner tonight. Any unfamiliar customers? Parked cars? Someone asking about William? Annie thought for a moment. A man came in around dinner. Gray coat, baseball cap. Didn't eat. Asked if the gentleman from last night had come back. I told him we get lots of gentlemen. Mr. Brooks grunted. That's my girl. Did he pay cash? Rebecca asked. Bought coffee, left exact change, sat near the window. William and Rebecca exchanged a look. Annie saw it. What? Eddie Morales described a man in a gray coat using a facilities badge on March 18, William said. The room went quiet. Annie set down her tea. Then he wasn't watching me because of you. William's face tightened. He may have been watching you because he thought this diner saw more than it should. Mr. Brooks looked toward the window, his diner suddenly feeling less like a refuge and more like a witness stand. Annie sat back, fear still there but now sharpened into purpose. Then maybe you were right to come back. William looked at her, at Mr. Brooks, at Rebecca, and understood that the investigation had crossed a line. It was no longer just documents. signatures, and boardroom betrayal. The people no one noticed were not only witnesses, they were now targets. Rebecca closed her notebook. Tomorrow morning, we pull security footage from this block. Mr. Brooks nodded. I know the bakery owner. He's got a camera facing the street. Annie lifted her chin. And I know what time the man came in. William felt the trail tighten again, but this time it wrapped around all of them. Outside, the dark sedan was gone. Inside, under the dim lights of the closed diner, Annie Carter took one more sip of tea and said, "Tell me what you need me to remember." By 6:30 the next morning, Brooks' Diner was open, but it did not feel open in the usual way. The coffee still brewed, the grill still hissed, and Mr. Langley still complained that his oatmeal needed more salt, but the room had changed. A place can keep its same walls and still become something else overnight. Annie moved between tables with her apron tied tight and her hair pulled back, but her eyes kept going to the front window. Every dark sedan that slowed near the curb made her shoulders tense. Mr. Brooks noticed and said nothing in front of customers. He only kept refilling her coffee mug behind the counter, though she barely touched it. William arrived just after 7 with Rebecca beside him. He wore a plain overcoat instead of the tailored suit jacket he usually seemed trapped inside. Rebecca carried a leather briefcase and looked like she had slept even less than he had. Mr. Brooks pointed at the booth. "Sit, both of you. If you're bringing trouble into my diner before breakfast, at least order something." Rebecca looked at William. "Is he always like this?" "Worse," Annie said, setting 2 menus down. "He's being polite because you're new." Mr. Brooks grunted from the counter. "Don't make me regret feeding lawyers." Rebecca almost smiled. "Coffee, please, black." William looked at Annie. "Did you sleep?" "A little." "That means no," Mr. Brooks called. Annie ignored him. "The bakery owner gets in at 7:30. His camera points toward the street. If that sedan passed by when I was walking, it might be there." Rebecca opened her notebook. "Good. And the man in the gray coat, you said he came in around dinner?" "Between 6:40 and 7. He sat by the window, ordered coffee, didn't drink much of it. He asked whether the gentleman from the night before had returned. Did he have an accent? Scar? Anything unusual?" "Nothing dramatic. That's what made him easy to miss." Annie paused, thinking. He kept rubbing his left wrist like his watch was too tight, but he wasn't wearing one. And he smelled like cigarette smoke, even though he didn't go outside to smoke. Rebecca wrote that down. "Did he touch anything? Cup, spoon, menu, the sugar packets maybe." Mr. Brooks set a mug in front of Rebecca. "Those dishes went through the washer." "Of course," Rebecca said. "No problem." "No problem means there is definitely a problem," Mr. Brooks muttered. William had barely spoken. He kept his hands around his coffee mug, listening. Annie noticed. "You're quiet. I'm thinking about Jonathan." "Don't think too much. He probably already did enough of that for both of you." Rebecca looked up. "What do you mean?" Annie shrugged. "People like him plan. They don't just do one bad thing and hope nobody notices. If he sent someone here, then this diner connects to something he's afraid of." William nodded. "Mr. Brooks said Jonathan came here before." Samuel stopped wiping the counter. Rebecca turned toward him. "You remember that clearly?" "I remember men who looked down at my floor like it offended them." Mr. Brooks walked over, towel over his shoulder. "Jonathan Pierce came in maybe 3 weeks ago. Not alone. He met a man in a gray coat." Annie stilled. "You didn't tell me that. You had enough on your plate." "Mr. Brooks, don't use that tone on me. I'm old, not dead." Rebecca leaned forward. "What did they talk about?" "I was behind the counter, not sitting in their lap, but I heard pieces. Transfer window. Board pressure. Something about when Whitmore falls. I thought it was businessmen being businessmen. Around here, people say big ugly words over cheap coffee all the time." William's face tightened. "Why would Jonathan meet here?" "Because he thought no one in a place like this mattered," Annie said. Nobody corrected her. Mr. Brooks looked troubled now. He left a receipt. Paid cash, but asked for one anyway. I might still have it in the register box. I keep paperwork longer than I should, because the city likes surprising small businesses with questions. Rebecca's eyes sharpened. "Please find it." Samuel went behind the counter and pulled out a metal cash box from a lower shelf. Inside were rubber-banded receipts, handwritten vendor notes, and old bank deposit slips. He sorted through them with thick fingers, muttering dates under his breath. While he searched, Rebecca's phone buzzed. She stepped aside to answer. Hayes. William watched her face change. What? He asked when she lowered the phone. That was my investigator. The plate Eddie wrote down belongs to a transport service. The account that paid for the ride links to Northline Holdings. But there's more. Northline shares a mailing address with Harbor Civic Partners and Greystone Renewal. Those were on the shell list. Yes. And all three recently filed preliminary interest in distressed real estate assets. William understood before she finished. Whitmore assets. Not just yours. Properties tied to pending development zones, including several in Southside neighborhoods. Annie looked from one to the other. Development zones? William's silence told her enough. My apartment building? She asked. Rebecca did not answer fast enough. Annie's face went still. Is my building on that list? William looked at Rebecca. Check. Rebecca typed on her phone, then opened a file from her email. Her finger moved down the screen. What's the address? Annie gave it. Rebecca found it and stopped. Mr. Brooks looked up from the receipts. Say it. Rebecca's voice was careful. The building is part of a block, listed under a potential acquisition package. It hasn't changed hands yet, but it's on the map. Annie sat down slowly. William felt the shame like heat under his skin. Annie. She lifted one hand. Don't apologize before you know what you're apologizing for. This is my company. Is it? Because last night you told me people were using your name without asking. That doesn't erase responsibility. No, but don't make your guilt the center of my rent problem. The words landed hard, and for a second William saw how often well-meaning people must have turned Annie's pain into their own moral performance. He nodded. You're right. Rebecca watched them, then said, This changes motive. Jonathan wasn't just hiding theft. He may have been positioning investors to profit if William was forced out and the company entered distress. Buy low after the scandal, William said. Exactly. And if those properties included buildings with poor tenants, Annie said, nobody important would fight too hard when they got pushed out. Rebecca did not soften the truth. That may be the plan. Mr. Brooks suddenly slapped a receipt onto the table. 3 weeks ago. 2 coffees. 1 slice of pecan pie. Paid cash. Receipt printed 8:12 p.m. William looked at it. Jonathan hated pecan pie. Then Gray Coat ate it, Mr. Brooks said. Rebecca took a photo of the receipt. This helps establish the meeting, but we need footage. The bakery, Annie said, standing. William stood too. I'll come. No, Annie said. He stopped. If you walk in with me, Mrs. Kowalski will ask why a man in a rich coat is following me around at breakfast. Then she'll call her sister, and by lunch the whole block will think I'm in trouble or engaged. Mr. Brooks snorted. She's not wrong. Rebecca closed her notebook. I'll go with her. Annie gave her a look. You're a lawyer in a rich coat. I can take it off. Still a lawyer. Fair. Mr. Brooks took his keys from the hook. I'll go. Mrs. Kowalski likes me. She tolerates you because you buy rolls. Same thing at my age. 10 minutes later, Annie and Mr. Brooks crossed to the bakery, while William and Rebecca waited in the diner. Waiting felt harder than doing. William looked at the regular customers, the cracked vinyl stools, the laminated menus, the tip jar with a handwritten sign for a local school fundraiser. Jonathan had come here because he believed places like this were invisible. William had lived too long benefiting from the same blindness, even when he had not meant harm. Rebecca sat across from him. You're thinking too loud. I built projects on maps, blocks, parcels, zones. I don't think I always saw homes. That realization won't help unless you act on it. I know. Good. Guilt is useless unless it becomes evidence or repair. He looked at her. Is that legal advice? It's middle-aged advice. Much more expensive. The bell over the door rang. Annie and Mr. Brooks came back with a flash drive in Annie's hand. Mrs. Kowalski had the footage, Annie said, and she wants you to know, Mr. Brooks, that your last check for rolls cleared late. Samuel frowned. That woman remembers everything except mercy. Rebecca took the drive. Let's see it. Mr. Brooks turned the small television behind the counter toward them while Rebecca connected her laptop. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. There was the street 3 weeks ago, wet from rain, cars passing. At 8:06 p.m., Jonathan Pierce entered Brooks' diner. At 8:09, a man in a gray coat followed. At 8:47, both exited separately. Jonathan paused near the curb. The gray-coated man handed him an envelope. William leaned closer. "Freeze that." Rebecca froze the frame. The man's face was turned partly toward the bakery window. Annie inhaled. "That's him. The man from last night." Rebecca saved the frame. Now we have him meeting Jonathan before the scandal and watching the diner after William came here. William's phone buzzed again. Another unknown message. This time there was no photo, just words. "Stop digging, or the girl loses more than school." The room went silent. Annie read it over his shoulder before he could hide it. Her face paled, but she did not step back. Mr. Brooks swore under his breath. Rebecca took the phone from William. "We document this and call the police." William looked at Annie. "You need protection." Annie's fear flashed into anger. "I need those men exposed." "You need both," Rebecca said. Annie looked at the frozen image on the screen. The gray coat, the envelope, Jonathan Pierce pretending his hands were clean. Then she looked at William. "You said your company might take my building. If Jonathan gets what he wants, yes. And if you win?" William did not answer like a billionaire. He answered like a man who had finally learned the weight of being believed. "Then the first thing I do is make sure no one uses my name to throw people out of their homes." Annie held his gaze, testing the promise for cracks. "All right," she said. "Then let's keep digging." William looked at the frozen frame again. Jonathan had thought the diner was beneath notice, the staff beneath memory, the neighborhood beneath power. But the receipt, the bakery camera, the night guard, the driver, Annie's sharp eyes, all of it had begun to gather around him. For the first time, William could see the shape of the trap. And for the first time, Jonathan Pierce was no longer the only one setting one. By noon, Rebecca had turned the back table of Brooks' diner into a temporary war room. Her laptop sat between a napkin dispenser and a basket of sugar packets. William's phone lay face up inside a clear plastic bag from Mr. Brooks's supply closet because Rebecca did not want anyone touching it again until the threatening message was documented. Annie stood near the counter with her arms folded, pretending she was calm, while her eyes kept returning to the words on the screen. "Stop digging, or the girl loses more than school." Mr. Brooks read it once and walked into the kitchen without a word. A moment later, the sound of metal pans being moved too hard came through the pass-through window. Rebecca took photos of the message, the number, and the time. "We report it. We preserve the device. We do not respond." William looked at Annie. "You shouldn't go back to your apartment alone." "I wasn't planning to ask permission." "I'm not giving permission. I'm asking you to be careful." "That sounds better." Rebecca closed the laptop halfway. "Annie, this is serious. People who send threats usually want panic, not conversation. We keep you visible. We keep a record of everything. And we make sure no one can twist the story first." Annie looked at her. "Twisted how?" Rebecca did not soften her answer. "A billionaire accused of fraud seen with a young black waitress. Now threats. Now housing tied to the company. If Jonathan's people are smart, they won't only scare you, they'll try to make the public doubt you." Annie gave a short laugh with no humor. "That won't be hard. People already doubt girls like me before we open our mouths." William's jaw tightened. "That's exactly what I don't want. What you want doesn't decide what they'll do." Mr. Brooks came back with 3 plates, though no one had ordered. Eggs, toast, fried potatoes. He set one in front of Annie first. "Eat." "I'm not hungry." "Neither is my patience." She stared at him, then picked up a fork. He put the second plate in front of Rebecca and the third in front of William. "You too." Nobody saves the truth on an empty stomach. Rebecca looked down at the plate. "Is this included in legal strategy?" "In this building, yes." The small exchange let the room breathe for a few seconds. Then the bell over the diner door rang, and all of them looked up. A young man in a brown jacket stepped in, holding a phone like he was already recording. Behind him, 2 more people lingered near the sidewalk, pretending to study the menu taped to the window. "Is this where William Whitmore met his little witness?" the young man asked. The room went quiet. Mrs. Alvarez, sitting at the counter, lowered her coffee cup. Mr. Langley turned slowly on his stool. Mr. Brooks stepped out from behind the counter. You ordering food? The man smiled. Just asking questions. Then ask them somewhere you plan to buy lunch. He lifted the phone higher. People deserve to know if a billionaire is paying locals to clean up his image. William stood. Rebecca touched his arm, warning him not to move too fast, not to give the camera what it wanted. Annie stepped out from behind the booth before either of them could stop her. I work here. I'm not a witness for sale. The phone turned toward her. So you admit you know him? I admit I poured him coffee. And now he's helping you with school? William took one step forward. Leave her out of this. The man grinned because that was the soundbite he wanted. So you are helping her. Annie looked at William, not angry at him, but disappointed that he had stepped into the trap so easily. Then she turned back to the phone. No, she said. He offered me nothing. And even if he had, you don't get to stand in a diner and decide that a black girl can't be kind unless somebody paid her first. The young man blinked. His grip on the phone shifted. Mrs. Alvarez spoke from the counter, her voice sharp enough to cut bread. You heard her. Now either sit down and eat or get out. Mr. Langley added. And if you're recording, get my good side. My daughter says I still have one. A few regulars laughed, not because it was funny enough, but because laughter can push back when anger might get someone arrested. The man lowered his phone a little. This is public interest. Mr. Brooks walked toward him. Public interest is meatloaf on special and coffee refills. Harassing my employee is trespassing. Rebecca stood now, calm and exact. I'm counsel for Mr. Whitmore. I'm also advising this establishment to ask you to leave. If you continue recording after being told to exit private property, we will document that too. The man looked around, realizing the room had not become the scene he wanted. No crying girl. No raging billionaire. No frightened old owner backing down. Just tired people who knew a bully when they saw one. He backed toward the door. This isn't over. Mr. Brooks opened it for him. It is for breakfast. When the door closed, Annie let out a breath she had been holding. William started to speak, but she raised a hand. I know you meant well, she said. I made it worse. You almost did. I'm sorry. I don't need you to jump in front of every insult. Sometimes that just proves to them I need a rich man to speak for me. He absorbed the correction. You're right. Rebecca watched Annie with something close to respect. You handled that well. No, I handled that like someone who has had practice. That sentence settled over the table. The video appeared online less than an hour later. Not the whole exchange, of course. The clip began with William saying, "Leave her out of this." Then cut to the young man asking whether William was helping her with school. The caption read, "Disgraced billionaire uses Southside waitress as sympathy shield." By 3 o'clock, people had found Annie's name. By 4, her college email had 3 messages from strangers. One called her a liar. One said she should be ashamed. One asked how much a billionaire paid for a diner girl's tears. She deleted none of them because Rebecca told her to keep everything. At 5, Annie's landlord left a voicemail reminding her that lease violations included activities that bring negative attention to the property. Annie played it once, face hard. Mr. Brooks was close enough to hear. That man has ignored broken heat for 2 winters, he said. Now he's worried about attention? He's worried about money. William sat across from Annie, looking at the phone like it was another forged document. This is because of me. She leaned back. No. This is because men like Jonathan know which stones to throw and who they'll hit first. Rebecca nodded. Annie's right. Guilt won't protect her. Strategy might. What strategy? William asked. We stop letting them frame her. No press conference. No emotional display. We document the threat, the fake narrative, the landlord pressure, and the connection to the acquisition map. Then we put all of that into the legal record. Annie looked at Rebecca. Can you do that? If it shows intimidation tied to witnesses or potential witnesses, yes. I'm a witness now? You saw the gray-coated man. You identified him from the footage. You received pressure after the threat. That matters. Annie looked out the window. My mother used to say paperwork can hurt you because it speaks when you're not in the room. Maybe it can help too. It can, Rebecca said. If we make it tell the truth. William's phone, now replaced by a temporary line Rebecca had arranged, buzzed with a call from Margaret. He stared at the name and almost ignored it. But Rebecca shook her head. "Put it on speaker," she said. He answered. "Margaret." Her voice came through smooth and cold. "William, what on earth are you doing?" "That depends which accusation you read first. Don't be clever. The video with that girl is everywhere. My attorney says this could affect remaining marital claims if your assets are tied up in some public relations disaster." Annie's eyes narrowed at that girl. William noticed. So did Rebecca. "She has a name," William said. Margaret paused. "Excuse me?" "Annie Carter. Her name is Annie Carter. I don't care what her name is. I care that you are dragging scandal into every corner of what used to be our life." William's voice stayed quiet. "No, Margaret. What used to be our life was built on people making sure corners stayed invisible." Rebecca looked at him, surprised. Margaret's tone sharpened. "You sound unstable." "I sound awake. You sound like a man taking advice from a waitress while his company burns." Annie looked down, but not before William saw the hurt pass across her face. He stood. "That waitress told me to look where powerful people forget to look. Because of her, we found a false access trail, a shell company link, a threatening message, and a man connected to Jonathan. You cannot be serious." "I've rarely been more serious." Margaret exhaled. "Then don't expect me to go down with you. You left the boat years ago." Rebecca's eyebrows rose, but she did not stop him. Margaret ended the call. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Mr. Brooks said from behind the counter, "I never liked her." Annie almost laughed, despite herself. "You don't know her." "I know enough." William sat back down, tired but steadier. "I apologize for that." Annie shook her head. She said what a lot of people think. Waitress, diner girl, that girl. It's always a way of making somebody smaller before they decide whether to hear them. William looked at her. "I heard you. I know. And I should have sooner. You heard me when you were ready. Most people don't even get that far." By evening, Rebecca had arranged for Annie to stay above the diner again, at least until they knew who had sent the sedan. Mr. Brooks insisted and refused argument. Annie called her professor to explain she might miss class. She did not mention billionaires, threats, or fraud. She simply said there was a family emergency, then stopped herself afterward, surprised by the word family. Later, when the diner emptied and chairs went up on tables, William stood near the front window with Annie. Across the street, the bakery camera blinked red above the awning. The neighborhood looked ordinary again, but neither of them trusted ordinary as much as they had the day before. "They're going to keep saying I paid you," William said. "Probably. I didn't. I know. I won't." She looked at him. "Good, because the day you try to buy what I said to you, it stops being true." He nodded. "Then what can I do?" Annie thought about it. "Don't defend me like I'm fragile. Defend the truth, like it matters to both of us." Outside, a car slowed at the corner, then passed. William watched until its taillights disappeared. "Tomorrow," Rebecca called from the booth, "we speak to the bakery owner formally, get Eddie's statement protected, and start tracing the man in the gray coat." Mr. Brooks locked the front door and turned the sign to closed. Annie picked up the last cup from the counter. Her hands were steady now. William noticed and said, "You're not scared?" She carried the cup to the bus tub. "I am. But scared people still get to tell the truth." That answer stayed in the room after the lights dimmed. And somewhere beyond the glass, whoever had tried to frighten her had made one mistake. They had assumed Annie Carter was only a girl in an apron. They had not understood that some people spend their whole lives being underestimated, and by 18, they learn how to stand where others expect them to kneel. By morning, the video had traveled farther than Annie ever had. It showed up on neighborhood pages, business blogs, gossip accounts, and one local news segment that used the phrase, "unexpected connection," as if kindness were suspicious when it crossed class lines. By 7, the diner phone had rung 11 times. 2 callers wanted interviews. One wanted to know whether Annie had been hired. Another hung up when Mr. Brooks answered with, "Brooks Diner, where we serve breakfast." Not foolishness. Annie worked the counter anyway. She poured coffee for Mrs. Alvarez, brought Mr. Langley his oatmeal, and smiled at a little boy who wanted pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse. Her hands moved from habit, but every time the bell over the door rang, she looked up too fast. William noticed from the corner booth. He had come in with Rebecca before the breakfast rush and taken the same seat, not because it belonged to him, but because it had become the only place in Chicago where the truth seemed to have begun speaking. Rebecca had her laptop open. The bakery footage is backed up. Eddie's statement is scheduled for this afternoon with counsel present. Paul Henson is coming after lunch with his driving notes. Now we need Caleb Moore. Annie set coffee down for both of them. Who's Caleb? Former IT technician at Whitmore, Rebecca said. He flagged irregular access 2 months ago, then got fired for performance issues. William's mouth tightened. Jonathan signed the termination. Annie looked at him. Convenient. Very, Rebecca said. Where is he? Cicero. Small house, wife, 2 kids. My investigator says he's been avoiding calls from anyone connected to Whitmore. Annie rested the coffee pot against her hip. Wouldn't you? William looked up. Probably. Then don't go there sounding like the company that fired him. Rebecca gave a small nod. That's why I'm going with him. Annie looked at William. No offense, Mr. William, but people with money sometimes think saying please makes it not an order. He absorbed that. How do I make it not an order? Tell him what it might cost him. Then tell him what you'll do so he doesn't pay that cost alone. Rebecca studied Annie. You ever think about law school? Every day. Usually while calculating whether I can afford a textbook. William looked down at his coffee. He wanted to help. He also knew offering again, in that moment, would turn her pain into his need to feel useful. So he said only, "You'd be good at it." Annie's eyes softened for half a second. Then go be good at listening. Caleb Moore lived on a narrow street of modest homes with chain-link fences, basketball hoops in driveways, and American flags that had weathered more than one hard winter. William parked 2 houses down because Rebecca told him not to pull up like a man arriving to acquire something. A woman opened the door before they knocked. She wore scrubs and held a toddler against one hip. If you're from Whitmore, we don't want anything, she said. Rebecca lifted her hands slightly. Rebecca Hayes. I'm an attorney representing William Whitmore. We're looking for Caleb. My husband already lost his job because of that place. William stepped forward, then stopped himself from crowding the doorway. Mrs. Moore, I know. And I'm sorry. She gave him a tired look. Sorry doesn't pay a mortgage. No, William said. It doesn't. That answer seemed to surprise her. A man appeared behind her. Caleb Moore was younger than William expected. Maybe mid-30s. With a beard he had not trimmed in a few days. And the wary eyes of someone who had learned that telling the truth could put food at risk. A little girl peeked from behind his leg. Dana, Caleb said quietly. Take the kids inside. His wife hesitated, then stepped back but did not go far. Caleb came onto the porch and closed the door behind him. I signed an agreement. I can't talk about internal systems, Rebecca said. Whistleblower protections may apply if you witnessed unlawful conduct. May apply. Caleb repeated. That's lawyer talk for maybe I still get crushed. William thought of Annie's words. Tell him what you'll do so he doesn't pay that cost alone. You're right, William said. Caleb looked at him. That's it? You're right to be afraid. If you speak, Jonathan's people may come after you. Maybe the company too, depending on who is still loyal to him. You have a wife, children, a mortgage. I should have understood that before I came here. Caleb folded his arms. Understanding doesn't change the risk. No, but protection might. Rebecca can put in writing that my legal team will cover your counsel, not company counsel. Yours, independent. If your testimony is needed, we'll seek protection before your name goes into any filing. And if Whitmore fired you because you found something illegal, I will support a wrongful termination claim myself. Rebecca glanced at him, surprised by how far he had gone, but she did not contradict him. Caleb looked toward the front window. His wife stood behind the curtain, watching. You say that now because you need me. Yes, William said, I do need you. But needing you doesn't make what happened to you right. For the first time, Caleb's anger shifted into something less guarded. I told Pierce there were after-hours credential events tied to your account, executive-level access moving through service terminals. He said I didn't understand the architecture. Did you? I built half the permission map after the merger. I understood it better than he did. Caleb looked down at his hands. A week later, HR called me in, said I had created unauthorized security queries. Said I was a liability. Did you keep anything? Rebecca asked. Caleb's jaw tightened. If I say yes, that means I violated policy. If what you kept documents a crime, Rebecca said, policy is not the only issue. He rubbed the back of his neck. I kept a backup of the audit flags. Not files. Hashes. Timestamps. Device IDs. Session routes. Enough to show something was wrong. William felt the ground shift beneath the case. Do you still have it? Caleb did not answer. From inside the house, his little girl laughed at something on television. The sound seemed to decide for him. I have it, he said, but if I give it to you, my family stays out of this until protections are in place. Rebecca nodded. Agreed. And I don't meet at Whitmore. Ever. Agreed. Caleb looked at William. And if this turns into some rich man saving his own skin, I disappear. William took the blow because part of it was deserved. Fair. Caleb went inside. Dana Moore opened the door wider this time, but her face stayed hard. He couldn't sleep after they fired him, she said to William. Kept saying he should have kept his mouth shut. William met her eyes. He shouldn't have had to. No, she said. He shouldn't. Caleb returned with a small encrypted drive in a plastic case. He handed it to Rebecca, not William. Smart, Rebecca said. I learned. They left with the drive in Rebecca's bag and Caleb's fear sitting in the car with them like a third passenger. On the way back, William stared out at the neighborhood sliding past. Corner stores, laundromats, churches with letterboard signs, school buses, men in work jackets, waiting near bus stops. For years, he had seen the city as parcels, zoning, opportunity corridors, asset classes. Now every block seemed full of people who kept records because they had learned the powerful might deny what happened. Rebecca broke the silence. You did better than I expected. That sounds like praise wrapped in suspicion. It is. He looked at her. Was I that bad? You were used to being obeyed. That's not the same as being bad. It may be close enough. No, Rebecca said. Bad men don't usually ask that question. At the diner, Annie was on her break, sitting with a textbook and a plate of fries Mr. Brooks had forced on her. She looked up when William and Rebecca entered. Well? Rebecca held up the bag with the drive. He talked. Annie leaned back, relief moving across her face before she could hide it. Good. William sat across from her. He almost didn't. Of course he almost didn't. He has more to lose than you. I know. Do you? Yes, he said. More than I did yesterday. She accepted that. Rebecca set up her laptop at the booth, but before she could plug in the drive, William's temporary phone buzzed. A message from Paul Henson. I have the notes. Also remembered something about Mr. Pierce in a gray coat. Can meet tonight. Rebecca read it and nodded. The circle tightens. Annie looked toward the window. Does that mean they get more dangerous? It may, Rebecca said. Mr. Brooks came over with coffee. Then we keep more lights on. That evening, after closing, Rebecca opened Caleb's drive on an offline laptop borrowed from her investigator. The screen filled with logs far more detailed than anything Whitmore had provided. Caleb had flagged executive credential use through service terminals on 7 separate dates. 3 of those dates matched questionable documents. 2 matched money transfers to shell companies. 1 matched a late-night login from a device ID that appeared only once before being wiped. Rebecca's voice was low. This is big. William leaned closer. Can we tie it to Jonathan? Not yet directly, but look at the admin override. J. Pierce CFO. For a moment, nobody moved. Annie, standing behind them, read the line slowly. That's him. Rebecca nodded. It shows his administrator credentials approved the permission change that allowed William's account to be accessed through a service terminal. William felt anger rise, but this time it did not scatter him. It focused him. He opened the door, he said, and someone else walked through wearing a facilities pass, Rebecca added. The gray coat, Annie said. Mr. Brooks crossed his arms. So now we know the rich snake had a helper. Rebecca closed the laptop. We know enough to pressure the board, but not enough to stop Jonathan if he runs. William looked at her. You think he will? I think men who build exits usually use them. Annie's phone buzzed then. She looked down, and her face changed. William noticed immediately. What is it? She hesitated, then turned the screen toward them. It was an email from the college bursar's office. Final notice. Registration. Hold pending payment. Mr. Brooks muttered, Not tonight. Annie locked the screen. It's fine. William said nothing, but the silence itself became careful. She looked at him. Don't. I didn't say anything. You were thinking money very loudly. Rebecca almost smiled despite the tension. Annie gathered her textbook. I can handle school, Mr. Brooks said. Child. Handling doesn't mean suffering in silence. I know, but I need one problem that still belongs to me. That stopped them all. William understood then that helping Annie would be harder than writing a check. A check could pay a balance. It could also insult everything that had kept her standing. He nodded. Then I won't take it from you. She searched his face to see if he meant it. Thank you. But when you're ready to discuss a way that honors your work and your future, I'd like to be part of that conversation. Annie looked away first. Maybe. It was not yes. It was not no. It was trust left unlocked by 1 inch. Rebecca's phone rang. She stepped aside, answered, and listened without speaking. When she returned, her face was set. That was my investigator. Jonathan Pierce booked a flight to Zurich for Friday night. William looked at the laptop, then at Caleb's drive, then at Annie, who was still holding a school notice she could not pay and a truth she had helped uncover. Then we have until Friday, he said. Annie pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. All right, she said. What's the next right thing? Friday gave them less than 72 hours, and none of those hours felt generous. Rebecca drew a timeline on the back of a takeout menu because the diner had run out of clean legal pads. Caleb's drive sat beside her laptop. Paul's text waited unanswered. Jonathan's flight to Zurich hung over the table like a clock only they could hear. William looked at the dates Rebecca had written. March 18. Fundraiser night. The gray coat meeting. Threatening message. Caleb's admin override. Each piece had weight, but not yet the kind that could pin a man like Jonathan Pierce to the floor. Rebecca tapped the menu with her pen. We need 3 things before Friday night. Paul's notes, the full identity of the gray-coated man, and something tying Jonathan personally to the money movement. Caleb's logs show he opened the door. We still need to prove he knew what walked through it. Annie sat across from William, her textbook pushed aside. What about the shell companies? Northline, Harbor Civic, Greystone, Rebecca said. They connect to one another, but not cleanly enough to Jonathan. Not yet. Mr. Brooks came over with a fresh pot of coffee. People don't hide money in places with their own name painted on the door. No, Rebecca said. They hide it behind men who owe them. William looked at Paul's message again. Then we start with Paul. Paul Henson arrived at the diner after 9, still wearing his driver's coat. He took off his cap before sitting, a habit from another generation. Mr. Brooks brought him coffee without asking. Long night? Samuel asked. Long 7 years, Paul said, then looked at William. No offense, sir. None taken. Paul placed a small black notebook on the table. Unlike Eddie Morales' spiral pad, this one was neat, almost formal. Dates, times, mileage, passenger names, pickup points, a working man's memory written in ink. I don't know if any of this helps, Paul said, but I wrote down what looked odd. Rebecca opened the notebook with care. Tell us about Jonathan. Paul glanced at William before answering. Mr. Pierce did not like being seen arriving certain places. He'd call through your assistant, or sometimes directly. Said it was company business. I drove him twice to the south curb near Whitmore Tower, not the main entrance, once to Brooks' Diner, once to a private terminal near Midway. William leaned forward. Midway? Cargo side, not passenger. He met a man there. Gray coat. Annie's fingers tightened around her mug. Same man? Paul looked at her. I believe so, miss. Rebecca wrote quickly. Date? Paul checked. February 27. Late. I remember because my wife called while I waited. Our grandson had a fever. Did Jonathan carry anything? A document tube going in. Nothing coming out. Rebecca looked at William. Blueprints? Contracts? Could be development maps, he said. Acquisition packages, Paul added. He told me not to log the stop. But you did, Annie said. Paul looked at her. My father said a man who drives should write down the turns. Smart father. He was. Rebecca photographed the pages. Paul, would you be willing to provide a statement? He folded his hands. If Mr. Whitmore asks, yes. William shook his head. Not because I ask. Only if you choose. Paul looked surprised, then nodded slowly. Then I choose. Mr. Brooks, who had been pretending not to listen while wiping the same counter for 5 minutes, said, That's how grown folks answer. Rebecca's investigator identified the gray-coated man just before midnight. His name was Victor Hale, a private security consultant with past contracts in corporate risk, labor surveillance, and eviction support. He had no formal connection to Whitmore, but he had been paid twice by Harbor Civic Partners. Eviction support? Annie repeated. Rebecca did not look away from her screen. That usually means pressure. Watching buildings, tracking tenants. Making people feel leaving is easier than staying. Annie's face went flat. So that's what he was doing outside my apartment. William felt the old anger return, but now it came with shame. I built a company where men like him could find work. You didn't hire him, Annie said. I built the roof he hid under. No, she said, sharper than before. Don't use guilt to make yourself the center again. Use it to move. Rebecca glanced at Annie. That may be the best legal strategy in the room. William took the correction. What do? We get proof of payment, Rebecca said. If Harbor paid Victor Hale and Harbor links to Jonathan's plan, we can show intimidation tied to the fraud. And Jonathan's flight? Mr. Brooks asked. I'll seek an emergency order if we have enough by Friday morning. Annie looked at the clock above the counter. That gives us 1 day. 1 day, Rebecca said. By then, the diner had closed. Mr. Brooks insisted Annie sleep in the upstairs room again. She argued less this time, which worried William more than if she had fought. After everyone left, he remained in the booth with Rebecca, going through Caleb's logs beside Paul's notes. At 1:40 a.m., they found the third crack. Paul's February 27 midway stop matched a late-night upload in Caleb's data. A device with Jonathan's admin credentials had accessed a restricted development folder 6 minutes after Paul logged Jonathan's return to the tower. That same night, a file titled South Corridor Distressed Asset Package had been exported, then deleted. Rebecca stared at the recovered metadata. There it is. William's throat tightened. The map, not the file itself, but proof it existed, was accessed by Jonathan, exported, and deleted. Can we recover it? Maybe from backup. Maybe not fast enough. From upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Annie appeared at the bottom of the stairs in sweatpants and an old college hoodie, hair loose around her shoulders. You're both still here. Rebecca closed her laptop halfway. Go back to sleep. I heard voices. William softened his tone. We found something. She came closer. Good something or bad something? Both, he said. Jonathan may have exported a development package tied to distressed properties. Your block may have been part of it. Annie looked tired, but her mind caught the point. So he wanted your company weak so someone else could buy those buildings cheap. That's what we think. And people like me would just become numbers in a folder. William had no answer that would not insult her. She sat slowly. When my landlord raised rent, I thought it was just him being greedy. Maybe it was bigger than that. Rebecca nodded. Pressure often starts before ownership changes. Notices. Repairs ignored. Rent hikes. People leave one at a time, and by the time the sale happens, the building looks easier to clear. Annie stared at the table. My neighbor Mrs. Grant moved last month. She said the heat was out for 9 days and nobody came. She's 73. William closed his eyes briefly. Annie looked at him. Don't. He opened them. I didn't say anything. You were about to look sorry again. I am sorry. Then help Mrs. Grant by proving it. Not by making that face. Rebecca covered her mouth with one hand. almost smiling. William nodded. Give me her full name tomorrow. I will. Annie stood, then paused. Mr. William? Yes? If this gets bigger, they'll say I'm lying about my building too. They might. They'll say I'm angry, or greedy, or that somebody told me what to say. Rebecca answered this time. Then we document before they define you. Annie nodded, absorbing the phrase. Before they define me. After she went back upstairs, William sat in silence. The city outside was dark except for streetlights and the occasional passing car. He thought of towers he had opened with speeches about revitalization. He thought of neighborhoods described in reports as underutilized, distressed, promising. Words that made homes sound empty before anyone had left. At dawn, Rebecca's investigator called. He had found a banking contact willing to confirm that Harbor Civic Partners had wired money to Victor Hale's firm 2 days before the diner surveillance, and again the morning after the threat. The contact would not go on record without subpoena, but Rebecca could use it to support an emergency filing. That's enough to move, she said after ending the call. William looked at the staircase where Annie had disappeared. Then move. Friday morning arrived with a hard wind off the lake. Rebecca filed for emergency preservation of records and travel restriction on Jonathan Pierce, attaching the access logs, Eddie's notes, Paul's statement, the bakery footage, the threat, and the financial link to Victor Hale. It was not everything, but it was no longer nothing. At 11, William received a call from Charles Wentworth of the board. William, what exactly have you done? Charles asked. What the board should have done before trying to remove me. I followed the evidence. You are escalating this beyond corporate review. Jonathan escalated it when he used my name to steal and threatened an 18-year-old girl. You need to be careful. No, William said. I needed to be careful years ago. Now I need to be honest. He ended the call before Charles could reply. By afternoon, the emergency judge had not yet ruled. Jonathan's Zurich flight was scheduled for 8:55 p.m. Rebecca paced the diner with her phone in hand. Mr. Brooks kept feeding people who were too anxious to eat. Annie sat at the booth, trying to study but reading the same sentence again and again. At 5:20, her phone buzzed. She stared at the screen and went pale. William noticed. Annie? She turned the phone toward him. It was another email from the college. Due to outstanding balance, your registration for the upcoming term has been placed on hold. For a moment, the whole case, the board, Jonathan, Zurich, shell companies, all of it seemed to move aside. Annie pressed her lips together, refusing to cry in front of them. Mr. Brooks whispered, Child. I'm fine, she said too quickly. William wanted to fix it so badly his hands ached, but he remembered what she had said. I need one problem that still belongs to me. So he did not offer money. He sat beside her, not too close. I'm sorry, he said. She gave a small, broken laugh. Everybody is sorry. The school is sorry. The landlord is sorry. The hospital was sorry when my mother died with bills still coming. Sorry must be the cheapest word in America. No one argued. Rebecca's phone rang. She answered, listened, and closed her eyes. Thank you, Your Honor. William stood. Rebecca? She looked at him. The judge granted an emergency order. Jonathan's accounts tied to the named entities are frozen pending review. His passport is flagged for notice if he attempts to depart tonight. Annie lifted her head. William exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. He can't run? Not quietly, Rebecca said. At that exact moment, William's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You should have stayed ruined. William read it, then looked around the diner. Rebecca with the court order, Mr. Brooks by the counter. Annie holding a school notice in one hand and the truth in the other. No, he said softly. That's what he was counting on. Annie wiped at one eye before any tear could fall. What's the next right thing now? William looked at the frozen order Rebecca had printed, then at Annie's college email, then at the street beyond the glass where ordinary people walk through wind with their heads down. Now, he said, we make sure tomorrow belongs to the truth. The court order did not make anyone feel safe. It only made the danger more visible. Rebecca spread the printed pages across the booth while Mr. Brooks locked the diner door early and turned the sign to closed. Outside, the evening crowd moved past the windows without knowing that a man with a private jet account, shell companies, and too many secrets had just been slowed down by a judge who probably drank bad courthouse coffee and read emergency filings under fluorescent lights. Annie sat with her college email still open on her phone. Registration hold. The words looked small compared to Zurich, frozen accounts, and federal filings, but they had landed harder than she wanted to admit. A rich man could lose millions and still have lawyers. A girl like Annie could lose one semester and feel her whole future tilt. William saw her looking at the screen, then looked away before his concern became pressure. Rebecca gathered the pages. We have a temporary hold, not a conviction. Jonathan can still fight it. His attorneys will say, we're overreaching. Let them, William said. They will also attack the evidence. Eddie's notes, Paul's log, bakery footage, Caleb's drive, the threat. They'll say it's circumstantial. Mr. Brooks stood behind the counter with his arms crossed. Circumstantial sounds like a word people use when the truth is standing in the room but they don't want to shake its hand. Rebecca glanced at him. That is not legally precise, but emotionally accurate. Annie closed her phone and pushed it away. What do we still need? Rebecca hesitated. William noticed. Say it. We need something that shows intent, not just access, not just movement. We need proof Jonathan planned to use forged signatures or knew someone was using them. The exported South Corridor package, William said. If we can recover it, yes. Or a communication, a draft, a note, anything connecting him to the forged approvals. William rubbed a hand across his jaw. Jonathan was careful. Careful men still get comfortable somewhere, Annie said. Rebecca looked at her. What do you mean? He met at the diner because he thought no one here mattered. He used the garage because he thought drivers and guards were background. If he kept something, it's probably in a place he thought was beneath attention too. William grew still. What? Rebecca asked. He did not answer at once. A memory had opened. Unwanted, but sharp. Jonathan in his office years ago, laughing at some younger executive who kept everything in cloud storage. Paper survives men who trust machines too much, Jonathan had said, tapping the leather notebook he always carried. Never put your real thoughts where it can find them. William stood. His notebook. Rebecca frowned. What notebook? Black leather. He carried it for years. Not for meetings with the board, not formal minutes. Personal notes, names, numbers, reminders. He used to say real thoughts belonged on paper. Where would it be? His office, if he didn't take it. His office has been sealed by internal compliance. Sealed by people who may already be protecting themselves. Rebecca reached for her coat. We need a court order. That could take hours. Breaking into his office would take less time and destroy the case. William stopped, frustrated because she was right. Mr. Brooks lifted one finger. Before everybody goes committing television crimes, didn't you say there was a cleaning crew? Rebecca looked at him. Samuel shrugged. I'm just a diner man. But offices don't clean themselves. Anya sat up. Luis Ramirez. The real Luis, William said. The man whose badge was used. Rebecca pulled out her phone. We have the contractor's company name from the access log. I can get a number. Call him, William said. But not like a lawyer trying to collect a statement. Annie looked at him. Ask. Don't collect. He nodded. Exactly. It took Rebecca 20 minutes and 2 reluctant supervisors to reach Luis Ramirez. He answered in Spanish first, then cautious English. Rebecca kept her voice even. Explained that his name had appeared in a record he might not know about, and promised he was not being accused of wrongdoing. When she put the call on speaker, William leaned close. Mr. Ramirez, William said, my name is William Whitmore. Silence. I didn't use your badge, Luis said quickly. I believe you. My supervisors say, maybe mistake. I was not there that morning. I had dentist for my boy. I believe you. William repeated. But someone used your name. I'm sorry that happened. The man's breathing changed. They use names like they use mops. Pick up, throw away. Annie's eyes lowered at that. Rebecca asked, did you ever clean Mr. Pierce's office? Yes, many times. Did you ever see a black leather notebook? Luis was silent long enough for everyone in the diner to hear the refrigerator hum. I see many things, he said. William spoke carefully. Mr. Ramirez, I know people upstairs often act like you are not there. That was wrong. I was wrong for being part of that. But if you saw something, it could help stop the person who used your name. Louis sighed. He keep notebook in bottom drawer, left side. Always lock. But one night, drawer open. He angry on phone. I clean trash. He say, get out. I see page because book open. What did it say? Rebecca asked. Names, company names, Northline, Harbor, and one sentence. He paused. I remember because my wife say same thing when bills come. It said, after Whitmore Falls, move fast. The diner went still. Rebecca's voice sharpened. Would you be willing to sign a statement? My company fire me. We will ask for protection, Rebecca said. Your name was used without permission. That matters. Louise gave a tired laugh. Matters to who? William looked at Annie. Then at Mr. Brooks. Then at the phone. To me, he said. And I should have made that true long before tonight. Louise did not answer immediately. I need think. Of course, Rebecca said. I'll give you my number. Before she could end the call, Louise added, there is another thing. Mr. Pierce throw papers in locked shred bin, but sometimes bag full. One night paper fall behind cabinet. I put in lost drawer near service closet, maybe still there. Rebecca closed her eyes briefly. Where is that service closet? 42nd floor. South Hall. Behind copy room. William was already reaching for his coat. Rebecca pointed at him. No, I didn't say anything. You were about to go. That paper could be there. And if you walk into the tower after a court order froze Jonathan's accounts, every camera in that building becomes part of the story. We do this properly. How? Rebecca checked the time. I call the judge's clerk. Emergency preservation addendum. We ask for access to the service closet in Jonathan's office under supervision. At this hour, the law does not sleep when rich men book flights to Zurich. Mr. Brooks gave a short nod. Best thing I've heard a lawyer say all week. It took 90 minutes. Rebecca paced. William stood. Annie sat with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she did not drink. At 9:38 p.m., the clerk called back. Limited supervised access granted. Rebecca printed the order from Mr. Brooks's old office printer, which groaned like it objected to justice after dinner. By 10:15, they stood on the 42nd floor of Whitmore Tower with a compliance officer, a building security supervisor, and Eddie Morales, who had insisted on being present once he heard Luis's name was involved. Eddie gave William a small nod, nothing more. The service closet smelled of paper, dust, and floor cleaner. A rolling cart sat near the wall. The lost drawer was a metal cabinet with a bent handle. Rebecca put on gloves before opening it. Inside were broken badge clips, a pair of reading glasses, a phone charger, old memos, and folded paper wedged beneath a flashlight. Rebecca lifted it carefully. It was a torn sheet from a legal pad, creased and stained with coffee. Across the top were 3 company names: Northline Holdings, Harbor Civic Partners, Greystone Renewal. Below them, a sequence of dates and initials: W, EW, approval templates, service terminal route; V, H, surveillance, South Corridor acquisition after board removal. William felt the hallway tilt slightly. Rebecca whispered, Victor Hale, surveillance. Eddie crossed himself under his breath. William pointed to one line near the bottom. There, Rebecca read it aloud quietly. Use March 18 hospital gap if needed. No one spoke. The lie had a spine now. Rebecca photographed the page, bagged it, and logged it with the compliance officer. Then, under the same order, they entered Jonathan's office. It was too clean. Desk cleared, shelves arranged, drawers empty except for company stationery and a few pens, but the bottom left drawer had scratch marks near the lock. He took the notebook, Rebecca said. Or someone took it for him, Eddie muttered. William stood in the center of the office where his friend had planned his ruin. For 20 years, Jonathan had smiled across conference tables, toasted him at charity dinners, spoken at his father's memorial, and somewhere in that time, friendship had become a tool. Rebecca touched his arm. William, I'm all right. No, you're not. He looked at the bagged paper in her hand. No, but I'm standing. They returned to Brooks' diner close to midnight. Annie had gone with Mr. Brooks after Rebecca insisted she not wait alone at the tower. When William entered, she stood from the booth. Well? Rebecca placed the evidence bag on the table. Annie read the visible lines through the plastic. Her face changed when she saw VH surveillance. "That's him," she said. "Victor Hale." "Yes," Rebecca said. "And this ties the surveillance, the shell companies, the forged approval plan, and your block together." Annie sat slowly. "So they really did think nobody like us would matter." William looked at her. They were wrong. His phone buzzed again, this time from Rebecca's investigator. "Jonathan has been stopped at private terminal. Attorneys present. He is demanding to speak to the board." Rebecca read it and smiled for the first time all day. He tried to leave early. William looked out at the dark street beyond the diner window. Of course he did. Annie's school notice still sat on the table near her textbook. William saw it, then saw her, and said nothing about money. Not yet. There would be a right way or no way. Mr. Brooks poured coffee for all of them, though it was too late for coffee. "To ordinary people who notice things," he said. Annie lifted her mug. Rebecca did too. After a moment, William joined them. The paper in the evidence bag did not solve everything. It did not restore his name, pay Annie's tuition, protect every tenant, or put Jonathan in handcuffs, but it gave the truth a voice strong enough to be heard outside the diner. And for that night, it was enough to keep going. By morning, the evidence bag sat in Rebecca's briefcase, and everyone in Brooks' diner moved as if the floor had changed beneath them. Mr. Brooks opened late, which nearly caused a neighborhood emergency. Mr. Langley stood outside tapping his cane against the sidewalk until Samuel unlocked the door and said, "A man can wait 10 minutes for oatmeal." "Mr. Langley answered, "Not at my age," then took his usual stool as if democracy had been restored. Annie worked the counter with a quiet focus. She had slept only a few hours in the room upstairs. Her school notice was folded inside her notebook, but she could feel it there the way a person feels a stone in a shoe. Still, she poured coffee, smiled when Mrs. Alvarez asked for extra cream, and reminded a delivery driver not to block the bus stop. William arrived at 7:30 with Rebecca. He had shaved, changed clothes, and looked more like the man newspapers used to photograph. But Annie noticed the difference. The suit was back. The old distance was not. "You look almost respectable," Mr. Brooks said. William hung his coat on the hook near the booth. "Almost? I don't hand out full compliments before breakfast." Rebecca slid into the booth and opened her briefcase. "We have a preliminary hearing at 2. Jonathan's attorneys will argue the travel restriction and account freeze are excessive. They'll also try to exclude the torn paper from the service closet." Annie came over with coffee. "Can they?" "They can try. We recovered it under court supervision. But they'll question chain of custody and relevance." William took the mug. "They'll say it could belong to anyone." "They will," Rebecca said. "Which is why Luis Ramirez matters. Eddie matters. Paul matters. Caleb matters. The paper is strongest when it sits inside a pattern." Annie nodded. "One voice is easy to dismiss. A whole room is harder." Rebecca looked at her over the rim of her cup. "You keep saying things lawyers charge money for. Then maybe I should start billing." Mr. Brooks called from the counter. "You start billing. Remember who gave you office space." The joke passed through the room, but nobody held it long. Outside, a news van rolled slowly by the diner, then continued down the block. Annie watched it until it disappeared. William saw. "Rebecca arranged for police to increase patrol near your building and the diner." Annie gave him a careful look. "Thank you. I know it doesn't solve everything." "No, but it helps." He accepted the small answer without trying to turn it into a larger moment. Rebecca's phone rang. She stepped away to take it near the register. William sat with Annie standing beside the booth, both of them watching Rebecca's face. It gave away little, which made every second feel longer. When Rebecca returned, she said, "Jonathan's attorneys claim he never intended to flee. They say Zurich was a long-planned investor meeting." Mr. Brooks snorted from the grill. "And I'm the mayor of Chicago. They also claim Victor Hale was hired by Harbor Civic Partners for unrelated property research." Annie's mouth tightened. "Research follows girls home now?" "Apparently," Rebecca said. "Which is why we're going to court with the threat message." William looked at Annie. "You don't have to come." She did not answer immediately. "Will they mention me if I'm not there?" "Yes." "Then I'd rather sit in the room where my name is being used." Rebecca's expression softened. "That room may not be kind." Annie looked down at her apron. then at the people in the diner. Mr. Brooks at the grill, Mrs. Alvarez reading a church bulletin, Mr. Langley pretending not to listen while stirring oatmeal he had already oversalted. Most rooms aren't kind until someone makes them answer for it. At noon, Mr. Brooks closed early again and put a handwritten sign on the door. Family matter. Back tomorrow. When Annie saw it, she stared a second too long. Samuel noticed. Don't get sentimental. It was either that or closed due to corporate foolishness, and I didn't have enough room. She smiled, but her eyes were wet. Rebecca drove them to the courthouse. William offered to arrange a car, then stopped himself before finishing the sentence. Annie caught it and smiled faintly. You're learning. I'm trying. The courthouse lobby smelled of wet coats, old stone, and burnt coffee from a kiosk near security. People moved through metal detectors carrying folders, purses, fear, and hope. Annie had been in public offices before, usually to ask for help and leave with another form. This felt different. Today, she was not there to beg anyone to understand. She was there because a lie had brushed against her life and found resistance. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Jonathan Pierce stood with two attorneys. He wore a charcoal suit and a pale blue tie. To anyone passing by, he looked like a man waiting for a business lunch, not a man whose plan had started to rot under light. When he saw William, his face did not change much. That was the old talent. Jonathan could lock a room from the inside and make you believe the door had never existed. William, he said. William stopped several feet away. Jonathan. Jonathan's eyes moved to Annie, then away, as if she were furniture. That single glance told her more about him than any file. So this is the waitress, he said. William stepped forward, but Annie spoke first. My name is Annie Carter. Jonathan looked back at her, mildly amused. Of course. No, Annie said. Not of course. You said waitress because you thought it was smaller. Rebecca's hand paused on her briefcase. William said nothing. He had learned by now that Annie did not need rescue from words. Jonathan's smile thinned. You've involved yourself in something far beyond you. Annie held his gaze. Men say that when they're afraid somebody beneath them learned to read. For the first time, Jonathan's expression moved. One of his attorneys touched his sleeve. Jonathan. He turned away, but not before William saw the anger. Good, he thought. Let the mask work for once. Inside the courtroom, the judge was brisk, gray-haired, and unimpressed by everyone. Jonathan's lead attorney argued first. The court order, he said, was based on panic, hearsay, class resentment, and a desperate attempt by William Whitmore to deflect blame for his own mismanagement. Victor Hale was a licensed consultant. Harbor Civic Partners had legitimate property interests. The travel restriction was punitive. The account freeze was overbroad. Rebecca listened without reacting, taking notes only when necessary. When it was her turn, she stood with the torn paper, the logs, the footage, and the statements organized in a clean sequence. Your Honor, this is not one suspicious event. This is a chain. Mr. Whitmore's credentials were used when he could not have used them. A service badge under Luis Ramirez's name was used by a man who was not Luis Ramirez. The same pattern appears on multiple dates. Caleb Moore flagged this and was terminated by Mr. Pierce. Paul Henson's driving notes place Mr. Pierce in contact with a man matching Victor Hale. Bakery footage confirms that contact outside Brooks' diner. Mr. Hale later surveilled the diner and an 18-year-old woman who identified him. A threat followed. Finally, a court-supervised search recovered a document referencing the shell company's surveillance, service terminal routing, and the March 18 hospital gap. Jonathan's attorney stood. That document has no proven author. Rebecca did not turn toward him. Not yet. Which is why preservation is necessary. The judge looked at the torn page through his glasses. Miss Hayes, are you alleging witness intimidation? I am alleging conduct consistent with witness intimidation and financial fraud. I am asking that the freeze and travel notice remain in place long enough for subpoenaed records to confirm or disprove the connections. The judge looked toward Jonathan's table. Mr. Pierce, your flight to Zurich was scheduled less than 12 hours after emergency records were preserved. Jonathan's attorney rose again. A pre-existing business meeting, Your Honor. The judge looked bored. I asked Mr. Pierce. Jonathan stood. Yes, Your Honor. It was a business matter. What business? Investor relations. With whom? Jonathan hesitated. It was small, but the whole room felt it. The judge made a note. I'll want names under seal by 5 p.m. Rebecca sat. William kept his eyes forward. Annie watched Jonathan's hands. For the first time since she had seen him on the bakery footage, they were not still. The judge continued the account freeze and travel restriction for 10 days, ordered preservation of all records tied to Northline, Harbor, Greystone, and Victor Hale's firm, and authorized subpoenas for communications among the named parties. It was not victory, but it was a door forced open. When court adjourned, Jonathan passed close to William in the aisle. You have no idea what you're doing, he said quietly. William looked at him. That used to be true. Jonathan's eyes flicked toward Annie. You're letting a diner girl make you reckless. William did not raise his voice. No. I'm letting her remind me who gets hurt when men like us are careful in the wrong direction. Jonathan walked away. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited near the steps. Rebecca moved first, guiding Annie between herself and William. One reporter called, Mr. Whitmore, are you using Miss Carter to repair your image? Another shouted, Annie, did he promise to pay your tuition? Annie stopped. Rebecca whispered, You don't have to answer. I know. Annie turned toward the microphones. William's body tensed, but he stayed still. My tuition is my business, Annie said. The truth is everybody's business. I served Mr. Whitmore coffee. I also saw a man who is now part of a court record. If you can't believe both things at once, that says more about you than it does about me. Then she walked down the steps. The clip aired by dinner. This time, they could not cut it into something weak. Back at the diner, Mr. Brooks watched the replay on the small television behind the counter. Mrs. Alvarez clapped once. Mr. Langley said, That girl ought to run for office, then added more salt to his soup. Annie sat in the booth, embarrassed by the attention but unable to hide a small smile. William sat across from her. You did well. I was scared. I know. No, you don't. He nodded. You're right. I don't. But I saw you stand anyway. She looked at him for a while. That part you can know. Rebecca's phone buzzed. She read the message, and her face sharpened. What? William asked. Subpoena response from the transport service came early. Jonathan's Zurich trip was booked through an account connected to Harbor Civic. Not Whitmore. William leaned back. So the investor meeting was not company business. No, Rebecca said, and there's a passenger note attached. She read it aloud. V.H. To deliver original ledger before departure. Mr. Brooks turned from the television. Original ledger? Rebecca looked at William. The notebook. Annie's eyes moved to the dark window, then back to William. Then he still has it. William stood, the exhaustion gone from his face. Where is Victor Hale now? He asked. Rebecca was already dialing her investigator. That is exactly what we're about to find out. Rebecca's investigator called back 7 minutes later, but the answer was not the one anyone wanted. Victor Hale had disappeared. His office in River North was locked. His listed home address belonged to a short-term rental he had left that morning. His phone went straight to voicemail. The private security license was real. The company was real enough to invoice clients. But everything else looked built to be abandoned quickly. Rebecca stood at the end of the counter, phone pressed to her ear, taking notes on a napkin because her legal pad was full. William watched her write Hale gone, rental cleared, phone dead, last ping near Midway. Midway again, William said. Rebecca nodded while still listening. Get me the terminal camera request in writing. Yes. Tonight, if possible. She ended the call and looked at them. Hale's last phone ping was near a private cargo terminal close to Midway, but not the same one Paul drove Jonathan to. Mr. Brooks crossed his arms. How many little airports do rich criminals need? Enough to make lawyers tired, Rebecca said. Annie leaned over the booth table. If Hale has Jonathan's notebook, he may not run straight to Jonathan. He might hide it first. William looked at her. Why? Because if the notebook is the thing everyone wants, it's the only thing keeping him valuable. Rebecca pointed at Annie. That is exactly how frightened intermediaries think. Intermediaries? Men who do dirty work for richer men, then realize they're disposable. William felt a grim recognition settle in. Jonathan would not protect Victor Hale if protecting himself required sacrifice. He had already used William's name, Luis's badge, Annie's vulnerability, and Southside tenants as pieces on a board. Hale would be no different. Paul Henson arrived at the diner 15 minutes later after Rebecca called him back. He carried the same black notebook, but this time his coat was buttoned wrong, as if he had dressed in a hurry. "I remembered something," Paul said before sitting. "The Midway terminal." Mr. Pierce did not go inside the main cargo office. He went to a smaller building, past a chain-link gate. There was a sign. "Rourke Storage." Rebecca wrote it down. "Rourke Storage? Yes, ma'am. Private document storage, maybe. I saw boxes through the glass. File boxes." William's eyes narrowed. "Jonathan used off-site storage?" "He used many things I didn't ask about," Paul said. Rebecca was already searching on her phone. "Rourke Secure Records. Private archival storage. Corporate clients. Climate-controlled vaults." Mr. Brooks gave a dry laugh. "Climate-controlled lies. That's fancy." Annie looked at William. "Could the notebook be there?" "Maybe," he said. Jonathan trusted paper, but he wouldn't keep all of it in his office if he was planning this for months. Rebecca called her investigator again and asked him to pull property and client information for Rourke. Then she called the court clerk. This time, her voice was sharper. The phrase "imminent destruction of evidence" appeared twice. While she waited for a response, William stepped outside for air. The evening had turned cold. Annie followed him, wrapping her hoodie tighter around herself. "You okay?" she asked. He looked down the street. "I keep thinking about how many people had to be ignored for Jonathan to get this far. Eddie, Luis, Paul, Caleb, you. Maybe me too. In a different way. You weren't ignored. You were distracted by being important." He turned to her, and despite everything, he almost smiled. "You don't soften much, do you? Soft lies don't help." "No, they don't." She looked toward the diner window, where Rebecca was pacing, and Mr. Brooks was pretending not to watch them. "Do you think the notebook has enough?" "I think Jonathan wouldn't be trying to move it if it didn't. And if you find it, then the board can no longer pretend this is just mismanagement. The banks will have to pause. Prosecutors will have something real. Maybe the tenants on your block get more time too." She nodded, but her eyes lowered. "What is it?" he asked. "My school hold came through today. Even if all this works, I don't know if I can register." William forced himself not to reach for his wallet or make promises. "That is unfair." Annie gave a tired breath. "A lot of things are. I want to help. I know that may not be the right thing to say. It's honest. I don't know how to do it without making you feel bought." She looked at him for a long moment. "Then don't do it tonight. Tonight, find the notebook. Tomorrow, we can talk about what help looks like when it doesn't come with strings." That 1 inch of trust returned. "All right," he said. Rebecca opened the diner door. "We got the order." Rourke Secure Records sat behind a low industrial building near the airport, beside a trucking lot and a warehouse with faded paint. They arrived with Rebecca, William, a court-appointed officer, and 2 local police officers who looked unhappy to be standing in wind over corporate storage disputes. Paul waited in the car. Mr. Brooks had wanted to come, but Annie told him someone had to keep the diner from burning down emotionally, and he gave in only after making her promise to call. Annie should not have come. Rebecca said so twice. William said so once, and regretted it when Annie looked at him like he had forgotten everything. "I identified Hale," she said. "If his face shows up, I can help." So she stood beside Rebecca under the harsh parking lot lights, hands in her hoodie pockets, watching the manager unlock the building. The storage manager was a thin man named Carl who kept saying, "We don't want trouble," while leading them down a narrow hall lined with metal doors. Rebecca handed him the order. "Then, don't create any." The unit rented under Harbor Civic Partners was near the back. Carl unlocked it with a master code. Inside were shelves of file boxes, 2 locked cabinets, and a small desk. No Victor Hale. No Jonathan. No obvious notebook. Rebecca photographed the room before anyone touched anything. William stood at the doorway, afraid to step inside and disturb the first place Jonathan's private world had cracked open. The court officer opened the first box. Development maps, acquisition projections, tenant turnover estimates. A folder labeled South Corridor Phase 2. Rebecca lifted it and looked at William. This is the file deleted from the system. Annie moved closer. The map inside showed blocks shaded in yellow and red. Her street was marked with a number. Her building had a note beside it. High pressure potential, low organized resistance. She read it once, then again. Low organized resistance, she said quietly. William looked sick. Annie. No, her voice stayed low. Let me be angry before you apologize. He stepped back. Rebecca found payment sheets linking Harbor Civic to Victor Hale's firm. Surveillance dates. Addresses. Photographs of buildings. Annie's block. Mrs. Grant's building. Brooks' diner. Then the court officer opened the locked cabinet after Carl produced an override key. Inside was a smaller fireproof box. Carl swallowed. I don't have a key for that. Rebecca looked at the officer. It's listed under the unit inventory? Yes. Open it under the order. The officer used a breaching tool from his kit. The lock snapped with a small sound that seemed too modest for the moment. Inside lay a black leather notebook. William did not touch it. He only looked. Rebecca put on gloves and opened the first page. Jonathan's handwriting filled the paper. Neat. Narrow. Controlled. Names. Dates. Initials. Amounts. W. EW. Signature templates. Caleb Risk. Remove. LR. Badge route. Hail to observe diner contact. Board removal window. Zurich if freeze risk. Rebecca's voice was flat. This is intent. Annie, standing beside her, read one line near the bottom of the page. If girl becomes problem, discredit as paid contact. For a second, the room disappeared around her. Not because she was shocked, because some part of her had known it already. Men like Jonathan always had a sentence prepared for people like her. William saw the line too. His face changed. Rebecca closed the notebook carefully. We're done. This gets logged now. A noise came from the hallway. One of the officers turned. Stay here. But Annie had already seen the shadow through the glass strip in the storage door. Gray coat. Baseball cap. Victor Hale looked in, realized the room was full, and ran. Victor, Annie said. William moved before thinking, but the officer was faster. Stay back. The hallway erupted in footsteps. Hale shoved past Carl, knocked over a stack of empty boxes, and made it to the side exit before the second officer caught him against the metal door. He fought for 3 seconds, then stopped when he saw there was nowhere to go. Rebecca stepped into the hall. Mr. Hale, I strongly suggest you ask for an attorney before you make this worse. Hale looked past her at William. Pierce said this would be clean. William walked closer, stopping several feet away. It never was. Hale's eyes shifted to Annie. You should have kept pouring coffee. Annie's hands trembled, but her voice did not. You should have remembered people in diners can read. The officer led Hale away. Back inside the storage unit, the notebook was sealed in evidence. The South Corridor file, payment records, surveillance sheets, and maps were logged one by one. Rebecca's face remained professional, but her hands moved with controlled urgency. She knew what they had found. Everyone did. On the ride back to the diner, nobody spoke for several minutes. Annie looked out the window at the south side streets passing by. Some buildings had broken porch lights. Some had plastic over windows. Some had children's bikes chained to railings. Low organized resistance, the file had said, as if people raising children, caring for elders, working double shifts, and surviving winter were not already resisting. William finally said, I promise you, that file will not become your future. Annie did not look at him. Don't promise only me. He nodded. No, not only you. When they reached Brooks' diner, Mr. Brooks unlocked the door before they even knocked. Well? Rebecca placed her briefcase on the booth table. We found the notebook. Samuel closed his eyes. Thank God. Annie sat down slowly. Her anger had not gone away. It had settled into something steadier. William remained standing. What happens now? Mr. Brooks asked. Rebecca looked at William, then at Annie. Now, she said, Jonathan Pierce stops being a rumor and becomes a defendant. By the next afternoon, Jonathan Pierce was no longer speaking through rumors, friendly board members, or carefully worded attorney letters. He was speaking through criminal counsel. Rebecca received the call while sitting in the same corner booth at Brooks' diner, the black leather notebook now photographed, logged, and locked in evidence. She listened for less than a minute before saying, "Then tell Mr. Pierce he should have thought about reputational harm before writing witness intimidation notes by hand." She ended the call and placed the phone face down on the table. William looked at her. "That bad? That predictable? His lawyer says the notebook is private property, taken out of context, and that any interpretation of the notes is speculative." Mr. Brooks came by with a coffee pot. "Speculative means they're scared." Rebecca held out her cup. "In this case, yes." Annie sat beside the window with her textbook open, though she had not turned a page in 20 minutes. The news had broken that morning. Prosecutors were reviewing evidence connected to Jonathan Pierce, Harbor Civic Partners, Victor Hale, and financial irregularities at Whitmore Development Group. The reports did not clear William completely, but they changed the question. He was no longer just the billionaire under suspicion. He was now the man whose name may have been used in a larger scheme. That should have felt like relief. Instead, William felt the weight of everyone else the scheme had touched. Annie's block, Luis Ramirez's badge, Caleb's job, Eddie's fear, Paul's notes, Mrs. Grant's cold apartment. A diner watched because one girl had spoken to him. He looked at Annie. "Have you eaten?" She did not look up. "You sound like Mr. Brooks." "That's a serious accusation." Mr. Brooks called from the counter, "And a compliment." Annie closed her textbook. "I'm fine." William knew better than to push. He had learned that Annie's fine often meant she was holding a door shut from the inside. Rebecca slid a folder toward him. "The board wants a meeting tonight. Emergency session. Now that the notebook exists, several members are suddenly very interested in appearing cooperative." "Of course they are. They will likely reinstate your authority conditionally, pending the investigation. The banks may pause the receivership process. Not cancel. Pause." William nodded. "That gives us time. It gives you leverage." Annie looked up. "What will you do with it?" The question cut through the legal talk. William did not answer quickly. A week ago, he would have said stabilize the company, protect assets, reassure investors. Those things still mattered. Employees depended on them. Families depended on paychecks. But now those words felt incomplete. "I'll stop the South Corridor acquisitions," he said. "All of them, until every tenant impact is reviewed." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "That will upset investors." "Good. They can experience inconvenience from the other side." Annie studied him. "And after review? If a project cannot be built without pushing poor people out quietly, it doesn't get built under my name." Mr. Brooks set down a plate of soup in front of Annie. "I'm writing that on the wall if he means it." William looked at him. "I mean it." "Then eat your soup, Annie. History needs witnesses with blood sugar." She rolled her eyes but picked up the spoon. That evening's board meeting was held by video because half the members claimed scheduling conflicts, which Rebecca called cowardice dressed as calendars. William sat in her townhouse dining room with the camera on and the South Corridor file beside him. Rebecca sat off screen, ready to intervene if he drifted into emotion where precision was needed. Charles Wentworth opened with a solemn expression that would have fit a funeral or a lawsuit. "William, given recent developments, the board recognizes the need for a more complete investigation before any permanent leadership action is taken." "How generous," William said. Rebecca tapped his chair with her pen. He inhaled. "Continue." "A woman from the risk committee said, 'We are prepared to temporarily restore limited executive authority, subject to oversight, if you agree to cooperate fully with outside auditors.' I already requested outside review." "Yes, well, the board now agrees." William looked at the faces in small squares on the screen, some ashamed, some defensive, some only calculating where power would settle next. "Before we discuss my authority, we discuss South Corridor." Charles frowned. "That is not on the agenda." "It is now." Rebecca did not stop him. William lifted the file. "Jonathan Pierce and entities tied to Harbor Civic targeted distressed residential blocks while planning my removal. Some properties were marked for pressure based on low organized resistance. Those are human beings, not weak points on an acquisition map." A board member named Klein sighed. "William, with respect, urban redevelopment always involves difficult language. No, It involves people hiding cruelty inside professional language. The room went still. He continued, calmer now. Effective immediately. I want all South Corridor acquisition activity suspended. I want tenant communications preserved. No rent pressure through affiliated entities. No maintenance neglect. No third-party surveillance. No back-channel outreach. If any board member objects, say so on the record. No one spoke. William leaned closer to the camera. That silence is the first honest vote this board has taken all week. After the meeting, Rebecca closed her laptop and let out a breath. You just made enemies. I already had them. Now I know why. You also bought time. The board agreed to pause receivership discussions for 10 days and cooperate with auditors. William sat back, tired. 10 days. In legal terms, that's a small miracle. In diner terms? Rebecca smiled faintly. Enough time for Mr. Brooks to feed everyone twice. The next morning, William went to Brooks' diner before opening. Annie was sweeping near the front door. Mr. Brooks was in the kitchen, singing badly with the radio. I heard about the board, Annie said without looking up. Rebecca, Mr. Brooks. He pretends not to gossip, but he gossips with moral purpose. William stood near the booth. South Corridor is paused. She stopped sweeping. No acquisitions, no pressure, no tenant action through affiliated companies while the audit runs. I also asked Rebecca to connect Mrs. Grant with legal aid about the heat issue. Annie looked at him then. You remembered her name. You told me to. No, I told you she moved. You decided to remember. He accepted that. I should have remembered people long before I needed them to save me. Annie leaned the broom against the counter. That's true. He smiled sadly. You never let me have the easy version. Easy versions are how men like Jonathan win. He reached into his coat and took out a folder, then placed it on the table between them. Annie's face changed at once. Mr. William, it's not money in an envelope. It's still a folder from a rich man before breakfast. Fair. He pushed it no closer. You don't have to open it now. You don't have to accept anything. Rebecca drafted it because I asked for a way to help that doesn't make you bought, owned, or displayed. Annie did not touch the folder. What is it? A scholarship structure. Not just for you. For first-generation students. Students who lost parents. Students working while studying. It would be administered through the college, with written criteria and independent review. Your tuition hold could be addressed through the first award if you apply and accept, but it would not be a personal gift. She stared at him. He continued carefully. There is also an emergency living stipend component. Again, through the fund. Transparent. Documented. No favors. No press, unless recipients choose it. Why call it a scholarship instead of just paying my bill? Because you said help that doesn't respect a person becomes another weight. I don't want to put weight on you. Her eyes lowered to the folder. What's it called? William hesitated. The Carter Scholarship for first-generation students. Only if you allow the name. If not, it changes. Annie's face tightened, not with anger this time but with the effort not to cry. My mother's name was Carter too. I know. My father's too. Yes. She sat slowly in the booth. If I say yes, people will say they were right. That I helped you because I wanted school paid for. They may. That matters. It does. She looked up, almost challenging him to make it simple. William did not. The truth doesn't always stop people from lying, but it gives you somewhere to stand while they do. Mr. Brooks appeared from the kitchen doorway and immediately understood enough to stay quiet. Annie opened the folder. Her fingers moved over the first page, reading each line with suspicion, pride, hope, and fear all at once. William watched her read the eligibility rules, the independent board language, the privacy clause, the renewable award terms. He had signed billion-dollar financing agreements with less anxiety. After several minutes, she closed the folder. I won't be your story, she said. No, I won't stand on a stage while people clap because a billionaire discovered poor students exist. No, if this fund exists, it helps more people than me. Yes, and if I accept, I do it because I earned my place in school, not because I was helpless. William's voice was quiet. I know. Annie looked at Mr. Brooks. You're being quiet. I'm capable. No, you're not. He came closer. wiping his hands on a towel. Your mama would say, read every line twice, ask who controls the money, and don't let pride burn down a bridge God sent with paperwork. Annie laughed once, and this time a tear escaped. She wiped it away quickly, annoyed by it. William looked down to give her privacy. I want Rebecca to explain it to me, Annie said. Not you. Good, William said. She explains better. And I want time. Take it. And if I accept, I keep working until I decide not to. Of course. She touched the folder again, softer now. Then maybe. William nodded. Maybe is enough. That afternoon, Rebecca met with Annie at the diner and went through the document line by line. Mr. Brooks sat nearby pretending to do inventory while clearly listening. Annie asked hard questions. Who selected recipients? Could William cancel the fund? Would her name be used publicly? Could the scholarship be revoked if she criticized Whitmore? Rebecca answered each one, sometimes smiling as if Annie were already cross-examining witnesses. By the time the sun dropped behind the buildings, Annie signed nothing. But she placed the folder carefully in her backpack. At closing, William stood by the door. Good night, Annie. She looked up from stacking menus. Good night, Mr. William. He smiled. Still Mr. William? For now. That sounds like progress. It sounds like probation. He laughed softly. As he stepped outside, his phone buzzed with a message from Rebecca. Jonathan has been formally charged. William stood under the diner awning and read the words twice. Then he looked back through the glass. Annie was helping Mr. Brooks turn chairs onto tables, the scholarship folder resting in her backpack near the counter. For the first time, gratitude did not feel like a debt he needed to pay quickly. It felt like a responsibility he would have to live up to slowly. And that, William thought, might be the only kind worth offering. 3 weeks after Jonathan Pierce was formally charged, Brooks' diner replaced its cracked front window. Mr. Brooks claimed it had nothing to do with the reporters, the threats, or the night a patrol car sat outside until dawn. He said the old glass had been letting in cold air for years and he was tired of paying to heat the sidewalk. Annie let him keep that explanation. Around the neighborhood, people knew there were things older men said because they wanted to protect the dignity of everyone involved. The diner did not become famous, not in the way the internet tried to make it. For a few days, strangers came in to take pictures of the corner booth. Mr. Corner Booth, Brooks put a stop to that by taping a handwritten sign near the register, buy breakfast or take your inspiration elsewhere. After that, only the serious ones stayed. They ordered coffee, asked Annie how school was going, and sometimes left without saying much. As if the booth had reminded them of someone they had once been, William still came in twice a week, not with bodyguards, not with cameras, usually early, before the rush, when Annie was refilling ketchup bottles and Mr. Brooks was pretending not to burn the first batch of toast. He sat in the same booth when it was empty, but he never acted as if it belonged to him. Whitmore Development Group survived, though not cleanly and not without pain. Auditors found enough rot to keep lawyers busy for years. Jonathan's accounts were frozen. Victor Hale cooperated after prosecutors made clear he was not as valuable as he believed. Harbor Civic Partners collapsed into subpoenas, denials, and men suddenly unable to remember who had invited whom to which meeting. The board issued a statement about governance reforms, accountability, and renewed trust. William read the draft and crossed out half of it. Too many words for we looked away, he told Rebecca. She looked over her glasses. That sentence will not pass legal review. It should. No. But I'll make them suffer a little. The South Corridor acquisitions were suspended, then dismantled, not delayed under a new name, not softened with better language, stopped. William ordered tenant meetings before any future project could be considered. He sat in church basements, school gyms, and community centers, while people told him what development had cost them before it ever claimed to help. Some were angry. Some did not trust him. Some asked why it had taken a scandal and a young woman in a diner for him to notice. He did not defend himself. Most nights, that was the hardest part. Annie accepted the scholarship after Rebecca revised the document twice and after Mr. Brooks read it with a magnifying glass he usually used for supplier invoices. The Carter Scholarship for first-generation students launched quietly through Harold Washington Community College. Annie insisted there be no press release using her photograph. William agreed. The first award cleared her tuition hold, covered her books, and provided a modest monthly stipend through the college, not from William's hand. When the bursar's office emailed confirmation that her registration was restored, Annie read it in the diner kitchen between lunch and dinner. She did not cry right away. She stared at the screen, locked her phone, unlocked it, read the email again, then sat on an overturned milk crate. Mr. Brooks found her there. "You all right?" She nodded. "You look like somebody handed you a map." She wiped her face with the back of her wrist. "Maybe they did." He sat beside her, knees cracking. "Your mama would have been loud about this." That broke her. Not hard, not dramatic. Just enough for the girl who had been holding herself upright for 2 years to lean her head against the shoulder of the man who had kept feeding her without calling it charity. "I miss her," Annie whispered. "I know, child. I wish I could tell her I didn't quit." Mr. Brooks put one arm around her. "She knows." A year later, the scholarship held its first small ceremony in a community college auditorium with bad lighting and folding chairs that squeaked every time someone shifted. Annie wore a navy blazer she had bought secondhand and altered herself. William sat in the front row beside Rebecca and Mr. Brooks. No one had convinced Mr. Brooks to wear a tie. "I came to celebrate education," he said, "not choke myself." Annie was not the only recipient anymore. There was a single father studying nursing, a woman in her 40s finishing a paralegal certificate, a young man who had aged out of foster care and wanted to become a teacher. Each of them had a story, and none of those stories needed William at the center. When he stepped to the microphone, he understood that better than he once would have. "A year ago," he said, "I walked into a diner believing my life had been reduced to accusations, signatures, and losses I could not survive. A young woman working there told me my life could not end in that booth. She did not flatter me. She did not ask me for anything. She told me to do the next right thing." Annie looked down, embarrassed, but she did not hide. William continued, "This scholarship is not a gift from a rich man. It is a correction. A beginning of one, at least. Too many people are asked to fight systems while hungry, grieving, working double shifts, raising children, caring for parents, and explaining themselves to offices that should have learned how to listen long ago. The Carter Scholarship exists because talent should not disappear under a bill, and dignity should not have to beg for a deadline extension." The room was quiet. Not polished charity quiet. Listening quiet. He turned slightly toward Annie. "This young woman did not save my company. Other people help do that, and lawyers will make sure they are properly exhausted for years. Annie Carter saved the man who had forgotten why a company mattered at all." Mr. Brooks muttered, "That line was good." Rebecca whispered, "I wrote it." "No, you didn't. I improved it." Then Annie was called to speak. She walked to the microphone with her notes folded in one hand. For a moment, she looked 18 again in the way fear can make any person young. Then she saw Mr. Brooks, Rebecca, and William. She saw 2 older women from the diner. Her criminal justice professor, Mrs. Alvarez, dabbing her eyes already, though nothing had happened yet. She unfolded her paper, but did not look at it. "When I met Mr. William," she began, and a few people smiled at the name. "I was working a shift and worrying about school, rent, and whether I could keep going without letting worry turn me mean. My mother used to tell me, 'Never let pain make you cruel.' I didn't know that saying those words to myself would one day help somebody else." She paused. "I didn't have money when I met him. I didn't have parents to call. I didn't have anyone powerful standing behind me. But I had a sentence. Sometimes that is all a person has. A sentence. A hand on a table. A cup of coffee. A choice not to walk away when someone looks like they're disappearing." William lowered his eyes. "The scholarship helped me stay in school," Annie said. "I'm grateful for that. But I want every person here to know this. Help should not make you smaller. Real help gives you room to stand taller. That is what I accepted, not rescue." Room. The applause began slowly, then rose. Annie stepped back from the microphone, face warm, eyes bright. Mr. Brooks stood first. Soon everyone was standing. After the ceremony, they returned to Brooks' diner because Mr. Brooks said hotel banquet food tasted like somebody seasoned it with printer paper. He had closed the place for the evening but cooked anyway. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, cornbread, apple pie. The scholarship recipients came too, along with their families. For once, the diner was full of people who were not rushing to work, court, class, or a second shift. They stayed, they talked, they passed plates. They became, for one evening, less alone. Near closing, Annie slipped into the corner booth with a cup of coffee. William joined her a moment later. "Still drink it black?" she asked. "Still tastes like punishment. You keep ordering it. It reminds me where I started." She smiled. "You didn't start here." "No," he said, "but I began again here." Outside, Chicago moved under a soft rain. The new front window held the reflection of the neon sign in the booth where cold coffee had once sat between a ruined man and a girl who refused to let him vanish. William looked at Annie. "I thought I was ruined the day I walked in. Maybe you were just unfinished." He laughed quietly. "You saved that one for a year?" "I've been busy." "With school?" "With everything." He nodded. "How is school?" "Hard, expensive even when it's paid for." People don't mention that part. Time costs, sleep costs. But I like it. Still law? Pre-law after I transfer. Maybe housing law. Maybe civil rights. Maybe both. You'll be dangerous. I hope so. Mr. Brooks called from the counter. Dangerous people still need to help stack chairs. Annie called back. In a minute. William took a small envelope from his coat and placed it on the table. Annie's face changed at once. He raised a hand. "Not money? Not for you." She waited. "It's a copy of the board resolution creating the community review requirement for all Whitmore residential development. No project moves forward without tenant impact review, public meetings, and independent legal aid funding. I thought you should see that it's not just something I said." Annie opened the envelope and read. Her expression softened, but she kept her voice steady. "Good. That's all? That's a big word from me. I've learned." She folded the paper carefully. "Mrs. Grant moved back, you know. I heard. She said the heat works now." "It should have worked before." "Yes," Annie said. "It should have." He accepted the correction the way he had learned to accept truth, not as punishment, but as direction. A week later, Annie received her transfer acceptance letter. She opened it at the diner, because Mr. Brooks threatened to call the college himself if she waited any longer. William happened to be there, though Annie suspected Rebecca had told him when to come. She read the first line, covered her mouth, then handed the letter to Mr. Brooks because her hands were shaking. He put on his glasses. "Well, read it," she said. He did, slowly, then looked over the page. "They let you in." Annie laughed and cried at once. "They let me in." William stood. "Your mother would be proud." Annie wiped her cheeks. "I hope so." "She would," Mr. Brooks said. "And your father too." Annie looked at the corner booth. "I keep thinking about that night. What if I hadn't said anything?" William answered. "Then I might not be here." She turned back to him. He did not make the sentence dramatic. That made it heavier. "And if you hadn't come back," she said, "I might have thought my words didn't matter." "They did. Yours do too now," she said. "So be careful with them." "I will." That evening, after the last customer left, Mr. Brooks allowed William to help turn chairs onto tables. He did it badly. Annie corrected his technique twice. Rebecca stopped by to pick up pie and stayed long enough to mock him. For a while, they were not a billionaire, a waitress, a lawyer, and a diner owner pulled together by fraud. They were simply people closing a room after a long day. When Annie finally stepped outside, transfer letter folded inside her backpack, William walked with her to the bus stop. Not because she needed protection that night, but because he had learned that walking beside someone was different from leading them. The bus pulled up with a sigh. Annie climbed the first step, then turned. "Mr. William?" "Yes?" "If somebody else sits in that booth one day looking like their life is over, you know what to say." He smiled. "I learned from the best." She shook her head. "No. You learned because you listened." The doors closed. The bus pulled away, carrying Annie toward school, toward law, toward a future that still had bills and grief and work in it, but also room. William stood under the streetlight until the bus disappeared. Then he walked back to the diner. Mr. Brooks was wiping the counter, pretending he had not watched through the window. "She'll be all right," Samuel said. William looked at the corner booth, at the place where cold coffee had once marked the edge of his despair. "Yes," he said, "she will." Then he picked up a towel and helped finish closing, because the next right thing was sometimes no larger than wiping down a table someone else would need in the morning. And for William Edward Whitmore, that was no small thing. The lesson of this story is that a life is not over simply because everything seems lost. William had money, power, and a name people respected. Yet he nearly gave up when betrayal took those things from him. Annie had almost nothing by the world's standards, but she still carried courage, kindness, and the wisdom to remind him to keep going. The story teaches us that real strength is not found in wealth or status, but in honesty, humility, and the courage to do the next right thing. It also reminds us that ordinary people are never truly ordinary. Sometimes the person others overlook is the one who sees the truth first and helps justice rise again. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.